I discovered an Archon prison beneath Area 51. What they feed on will haunt humanity forever. Before I start, I need you to do something for me. Comment right now where you're listening to this. Your bedroom, your car, walking your dog, sitting in your office pretending to work. I don't care. Just tell me. Because if this recording disappears tomorrow, if I disappear tomorrow, I need to know that somebody, somewhere, heard what I'm about to say. I need proof that this got out before they erased me. And trust me, they will try to erase me. They've done it before. I've seen the files. I've seen the names of people who knew too much, and I've seen what happened to them. So please, just comment. Let me know you're real. Let me know I'm not screaming into the void here. My name is Marcus Whitfield. Sergeant Marcus Whitfield, United States Air Force, 12 years of service. I'm 34 years old, born in Corpus Christi, Texas. Graduated from Texas A&M with a degree in criminal justice that I thought would take me to the FBI, but ended up taking me somewhere so much worse. I joined the Air Force in 2013, got my training at Lackland, specialized in security forces. That's military police, essentially, protecting assets, guarding installations, doing the grunt work that keeps classified material classified. I was good at it, damn good. Clean record, commendations, top secret clearance by year 3. Never missed a duty shift. Never asked questions I wasn't supposed to ask. I was exactly the kind of soldier they want. Loyal, capable, and just smart enough to follow complex orders, but not smart enough to wonder why. For the last 4 years, I was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. If you know anything about military aviation, you know Nellis. It's huge. It's where they test advanced aircraft, where they train fighter pilots, where they do all kinds of things that the public will never hear about. I thought I'd seen classified. I thought I understood what need to know meant. I thought I was on the inside. Jesus Christ, I wasn't even close. Nellis was kindergarten. What I'm about to tell you about, that's the real school. And trust me, you don't graduate from that school. You either become part of it, or you become fuel for it. I chose the first option because I'm a coward. I chose to live, and now I have to live with what I know. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. Well, not 3 weeks ago exactly. It started earlier than that. But 3 weeks ago is when I understood what I was really looking at. When I understood that everything I thought I knew about reality, about humanity's place in the universe, about good and evil and God and the devil, all of it was wrong. Worse than wrong. It was a children's story we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. The truth is so much darker. The truth is that we're not the apex predator on this planet. We never were. We're livestock. We're a renewable resource. And the worst part? Our own governments know. They've always known. And they made a deal. I'm recording this on an old analog tape recorder I bought from a pawn shop in Rachel, Nevada. That little town near Area 51, where all the UFO tourists go. Analog, because digital leaves traces. Digital can be scrubbed, tracked, erased remotely. This tape is physical. I'm going to smuggle it out through a contact. Someone who doesn't know what's on it. Someone expendable enough that if they get caught, it won't lead back to the main operation. If you're hearing this, it means I got it out. It means I succeeded. Or it means I'm already dead, and someone found this after they disappeared me. Either way, it's out now. The truth is out. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You can't go back to thinking the world works the way you thought it did. What I'm about to tell you sounds insane. It sounds like the ravings of someone who's lost their mind. Someone who's been watching too many conspiracy theory videos on YouTube at 3 in the morning. I get it. If someone had told me this story a month ago, I would have laughed in their face. I would have assumed they were schizophrenic or on drugs, or just desperate for attention. But I'm not crazy. I'm not on drugs, and I sure as hell don't want the attention this is going to bring me. What I want is for someone, anyone, to know the truth before they bury it forever. Before they bury me. I worked in a prison. Not the kind of prison you're thinking of. Not cells and bars and human inmates doing time for human crimes. I worked in a prison that holds things that shouldn't exist. Things that have been here longer than we have. Things that our ancestors tried to warn us about in their myths and their religions and their folklore. But we stopped believing in them. We called them superstition. We called them metaphor. We were wrong. They're real. And we've been feeding them for decades. Here's what you need to understand before I go any further. And I mean really understand. Not just hear. What I saw changes everything. It changes why wars happen. It changes why atrocities happen. It changes what governments are actually doing while they distract us with elections and scandals and entertainment. If what I'm about to tell you is true, and it is, God help me, it is, then everything you think about human suffering, about history, about free will, it's all been managed, cultivated, harvested. We think we're making our own choices, building our own civilizations, fighting our own battles. But we're not. We're crops, and someone's been tending the field. I'm going to walk you through this step by step, how I got recruited for the assignment, what I saw in those first days, the moment I understood what I was really looking at, and finally, the choice they gave me, the choice between joining them or becoming food. I picked wrong, or maybe I picked right. I don't even know anymore. What I do know is that I can't carry this alone. Someone else has to know. Millions of people need to know. Because if enough people know, maybe they can't keep doing it. Maybe the system breaks down. Or maybe I'm naive. Maybe they're so powerful that even if everyone knew, nothing would change. But I have to try. So here it is, the full story. Everything I saw beneath Area 51. Everything they're keeping from you. Everything they're feeding on. And why, after seeing it, I'll never believe in God again. Because if God exists and allows this, then God is either powerless or complicit. And I don't know which possibility is worse. Let's start with the night everything changed. The night I got the call that would end my life as I knew it. It was October 23rd, 2024, 2:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I checked my phone when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on my barracks door. The kind of knock that's designed to wake you up but not wake up everyone else on the floor. Military knock. Controlled. Purposeful. I'd been asleep maybe 40 minutes. I'd pulled a double shift doing perimeter security around the flight line. Hadn't gotten back to my rack until after 1. My body was still in that heavy, dead sleep where your muscles haven't even begun to recover yet. But the knocking cut through it like a blade. I knew immediately it wasn't social. Nobody comes to your door at 2 a.m. with good news. I opened the door to find a courier I'd never seen before. Not Air Force, at least not wearing an Air Force uniform I recognized. He was in solid black BDUs with no insignia, no name tape, no rank, nothing. Just a guy in black tactical gear with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He didn't say hello, didn't introduce himself, just held out a sealed manila envelope, the kind with the red and white classified tape across the seal, and a signature line that meant if I broke it, I was acknowledging receipt of whatever orders were inside. Sergeant Whitfield, he said. Not a question, a statement. Like he'd been looking at my photo for the last hour and had my face memorized. Sign here. He held out a digital tablet. I signed. He handed me the envelope, turned, and walked away. No explanation, no good luck or report to your CO or any of the normal procedure. He just disappeared down the hallway like a ghost. I stood there in my doorway holding this envelope, and I felt it. That feeling you get when you know your life just changed and you don't even know how yet. It's the same feeling I got the day my parents died in that car wreck when I was 19. The same feeling I got when my ex-wife told me she'd been cheating for 6 months and wanted a divorce. That hollow, cold sensation in your stomach that says, nothing will be the same after this. I went back inside, closed the door, sat on my bunk, and just stared at the envelope for maybe 5 minutes. I wasn't scared yet. I was just aware. Aware that whatever was in there, I wasn't going to like it. When I finally opened it, there were 3 things inside. First, a single sheet of paper with transfer orders. SGT Marcus J. Whitfield, immediate reassignment. Groom Lake Sector, Nevada Test and Training Range. Clearance level, Delta 9. Report time, 0800 hours, 23 October 2024. That gave me less than 6 hours. Second, there was a page of regulations I had to acknowledge. The usual stuff about classified information, unauthorized disclosure, penalties under the UCMJ, and about 4 different federal statutes. But also some language I'd never seen before. Phrases like extrajudicial containment protocols and non-human intelligence interaction standards and psychological resilience certification required. What the hell was that supposed to mean? And third, there was a black key card with a magnetic stripe and my name laser etched into it. No logo. No issuing authority. Just my name and a 12-digit alphanumeric code. Groom Lake. I knew what that was, obviously. Everybody in the Air Force knows. It's the official designation for Area 51, The place that technically doesn't exist. The installation that the government denied existed until 2013 when they finally admitted, yeah, okay, there's a facility out there, but it's just for testing aircraft. Nothing weird, definitely no aliens. Stop asking. I'd never been there. Never expected to go there. My clearance was high, but Groom Lake was a different tier entirely. You didn't just get assigned there. You got vetted, interviewed, psychologically evaluated, polygraphed 6 ways from Sunday. It took months, but here I was, getting orders to report in 6 hours to a place I'd never been cleared for, with a clearance level, Delta 9, that I'd never even heard of. I'd heard of Delta clearances. They're above top secret, reserved for people working on experimental propulsion, advanced weapons, things that could change the balance of global power if they leaked. But Delta 9? That wasn't in any manual I'd ever read. My instincts were screaming. You know that little voice in your head? The one that's kept humans alive for thousands of years by telling them when something's wrong? Mine was howling. It was telling me to refuse the orders, to go to my commanding officer, to demand an explanation, to call the Inspector General, to do anything except get in a vehicle and drive out to the most secretive military installation in the country, based on 6 hours' notice and a piece of paper I couldn't verify. But here's the thing about the military that civilians don't always understand. You can't just refuse orders. Not orders like this. Not with this level of classification. If I refused, I'd be court-martialed. I'd lose everything. My career, my benefits, my freedom. They'd bury me in Leavenworth and I'd spend the next 10 years breaking rocks. And even if I tried to fight it, who would I fight it with? This wasn't coming through normal channels. This was something else. I packed my duffel in about 20 minutes. Didn't take much. Uniforms, toiletries, my laptop, a couple of books I'd been reading. I didn't know how long I'd be gone. The orders didn't say. They just said, indefinite assignment pending mission completion. I thought about calling someone. My brother, maybe. My ex, even though we hadn't spoken in 2 years, just to tell someone where I was going. But I couldn't. The regulations I'd signed specifically prohibited any communication about the transfer, even confirming that it had happened. I was supposed to vanish from Nellis without a word, like I'd never been there. So that's what I did. I walked across the base at 400 hours with my duffel over my shoulder, and it felt like a funeral march. The flight line was quiet, except for the distant whine of a jet engine being tested somewhere. The desert air was cold, that sharp, dry cold that Nevada gets in October when the sun goes down and all the heat just bleeds out into space. I passed the barracks where guys I'd worked with for 4 years were sleeping. I passed the chow hall where I'd eaten probably 1,000 meals. I passed the gym where I'd worked out every morning at 05:30 for longer than I could remember. And I knew somehow that I wasn't coming back. Not really. Even if I physically returned to Nellis someday, I wouldn't be the same person. Whatever I was about to see, whatever I was about to become part of, it was going to change me. There was a black SUV waiting for me outside the base commander's office. Not a military vehicle, no markings, no government plates, just a black Chevy Suburban with tinted windows that looked like it had been driven straight out of a Secret Service motor pool. The same guy who delivered the envelope was standing next to it. Still no expression, still no insignia. He opened the rear door for me. "Get in, Sergeant," he said. "We're on a schedule." I threw my duffel in the back seat and climbed in after it. The interior was leather, clean, and smelled faintly of disinfectant. There was a partition between the front and back seats, tinted so dark I could barely see the outline of the driver. The courier got in the front passenger seat, and we started moving. We drove in silence for 3 hours. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. My mind was racing too fast, running through every possibility, every scenario, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just volunteered for. Or not volunteered, been voluntold, as we say in the military. The sun came up somewhere around 6, and I watched the Nevada desert scroll past the window. Empty, endless, beautiful in that harsh, unforgiving way that deserts are. We stayed off the main highways, taking back roads I didn't recognize, passing through towns so small they didn't have names on any map. And the whole time, that voice in my head kept whispering, "Turn back, get out, run." But I didn't. I stayed in that vehicle. I let them take me. And that decision, that moment of compliance, is why I'm here now, recording this message, knowing what I know. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd refused. If I'd jumped out of that SUV at a stoplight and disappeared into the desert. Would they have come after me? Would they have let me go? Or would I have just been another name on a list somewhere? Another person who knew too much and had to be silenced. I guess I'll never know. What I do know is that by the time we reached the outer perimeter of Groom Lake, it was already too late to turn back. The outer perimeter came up around 0900 hours. I say, came up, because you don't see it until you're almost on top of it. No signs, no warnings. Just suddenly there's a 12-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire stretching across the desert, and a gate with 2 guards in desert camo carrying M4s. The SUV slowed, but didn't stop. One of the guards looked at something on a tablet, nodded, and waved us through. The gate rolled open on hydraulics. We passed through. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be like any base I'd ever been on. Because about 100 yards past that first gate, there was a second one. Same fence, same razor wire, but these guards were different. They weren't Air Force. I couldn't tell what they were. Their uniforms were unmarked black tactical gear, and they had the kind of weapons you don't see outside of special operations units. HK-4116s with suppressors, laser sights, and magazines that looked heavier than standard issue. They didn't wave us through. They approached the vehicle. One of them motioned for the driver to roll down the window, scanned something, a barcode maybe, or an RFID chip, and then looked directly at me through the tinted partition. He stared for a long moment. Then he stepped back and signaled the gate. We went through. Then there was a third gate, and a fourth, each one with progressively more intense security. At the third gate, they made us get out of the vehicle. I stood in the sun with my duffel while 2 guards went through it item by item. They took my phone. They took my watch, a Garmin smartwatch I'd had for 3 years. They took my laptop. Everything with GPS, everything with wireless capability, everything that can transmit or receive a signal, one of them said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. He handed me a receipt with a claim number. You'll get it back when you leave. If you leave. That last part he said quieter, almost under his breath, but I heard it. If you leave. Not when. If. They put all my electronics in a Faraday bag, sealed it with a numbered tag, and tossed it onto a cart with about 30 other bags. Then they ran a handheld scanner over my body. Not a metal detector, something else. It beeped near my shoulder. What's that? The guard asked. Surgical pin, I said. Broke my collarbone in a training accident 4 years ago. There's a titanium pin holding it together. He checked a tablet, scrolled through what I assume was my medical file, nodded, and moved on. They were thorough. They checked my boots, my belt, even the fillings in my teeth with some kind of portable X-ray. I felt like a smuggler getting processed at a border crossing. The fourth gate was different. It wasn't manned by guards. It was automated. The SUV pulled up to a reinforced barrier that looked like it could stop a tank. There was a scanner mounted on a post, one of those biometric things that reads your iris, your fingerprint, your facial structure, probably your damn DNA for all I know. The courier in the front seat leaned out and pressed his hand to a panel. A red laser swept across his face. Then he gestured to me. Your turn, Sergeant. Use the key card they gave you. I pulled out the black key card from my pocket and held it up to the scanner. Another laser, this one green, swept across the card and then across my face. There was a pause that felt like it lasted forever. Then a computerized voice said, Whitfield, Marcus J. Clearance Delta 9 confirmed. Access granted to Sector Groom Lake 7. Welcome to Dreamland. The barrier dropped into the ground with a hydraulic hiss. We drove through, and just like that I was inside Area 51. But here's what you need to understand. That wasn't Area 51, not the real one. That was the outer facility, the part they show in satellite photos, the part they admit exists. Hangars, runways, a few administrative buildings. It looked like any other Air Force installation, just more remote. We drove past a hangar where I could see the tail of some kind of aircraft. Angular, black, probably a stealth prototype. We passed a parking lot with maybe 40 vehicles in it. We passed a chow hall, a gym, dormitories that looked like they'd been built in the 1980s and never updated. It was almost disappointing. After all that security, after all that build-up, it just looked normal. I remember thinking, this is it? This is what all the conspiracy theorists lose their minds over? A couple of hangars and some old buildings? The SUV didn't stop at any of those buildings. We kept driving, past the main complex, out toward what looked like the edge of the facility. And that's when I saw it. A structure built into the side of a rocky hill. It looked like a bunker entrance, the kind you'd see at a Cold War missile silo. Massive steel doors, maybe 30 feet tall, set into concrete and rock. There were no windows, no signs, just a keypad and another biometric scanner next to the entrance. The SUV pulled up and stopped. The courier turned around to look at me through the partition. "This is where you get out, Sergeant," he said. "From this point forward, you're under the command of Captain Hendricks. He'll brief you on your assignment. Follow his instructions exactly. Do not deviate. Do not ask questions unless he invites them. And do not, under any circumstances, discuss what you see here with anyone who doesn't have clearance. That includes other soldiers. That includes your family. That includes God himself if you happen to meet him. Are we clear?" I nodded. "Say it out loud, Sergeant." "We're clear," I said. My mouth felt dry. "Good. Welcome to the real Area 51. He got out and opened my door. I stepped out into the desert heat carrying my duffel, and the courier led me to the bunker entrance. He pressed his palm to the scanner. The massive steel doors began to slide open with a sound like a bank vault being cracked, and behind those doors was a corridor. Not a hallway, a corridor. Military-grade lighting, concrete walls painted institutional gray, and a floor that looked like it had been polished so many times it reflected the lights above. The temperature dropped immediately. It was maybe 90 degrees outside. Inside that corridor, it felt like 60. The courier gestured for me to enter. "Captain Hendricks is waiting for you in briefing room C7. Straight down this hall, third door on your left. Don't wander." Then he turned and walked back to the SUV. The doors began to close behind me, and I was alone in that corridor. I started walking. My boots echoed on the polished floor, and that echo sounded wrong somehow. Too sharp, too clear, like the walls were absorbing sound instead of reflecting it. I counted my steps. 112 steps to the third door on the left. It was unmarked except for the designation C7, stenciled in black paint. I knocked. "Enter," a voice called from inside. I opened the door and walked into a small briefing room. A table, 4 chairs, a projector screen on one wall. And sitting at the table was a man in an Air Force uniform with captain's bars on his shoulders. Captain Hendricks, I assumed. He was maybe 45, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that looked like it had seen too much and stopped being surprised by anything. He gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Sergeant Whitfield. We have a lot to cover and not much time." I sat. Hendricks slid a folder across the table to me. "Before we begin, you need to sign this." I opened the folder. It was another non-disclosure agreement, but this one was different. The language was more aggressive. Phrases like penalty of death and summary execution authorized and no judicial review. I looked up at him. "This says you can kill me if I talk." "That's correct," Hendricks said. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "This facility operates under a special executive order signed in 1952 and renewed by every president since. Inside this installation, we are not bound by standard military law. We are not bound by the Constitution. We are not bound by the Geneva Conventions. You will do what you're told when you're told, or you will be removed. Permanently. Do you understand?" I stared at him. "I understand." "Good. Sign it." I signed it. What else was I going to do? I was already inside. I was already trapped. Hendricks took the folder back and filed it in a cabinet behind him. Then he turned off the lights and turned on the projector. An image appeared on the screen. It was a map of the facility, but it wasn't the facility I'd just driven through. This was something else. The map showed layers, levels, going down. What you saw outside, the hangars, the runways, the buildings, that's Sector 1. That's where we test aircraft. That's where we develop propulsion systems and stealth technology and all the toys that keep America ahead of China and Russia. That's the part of Area 51 that the public thinks is secret. It's not. It's a decoy. It's theater for conspiracy tourists and satellite cameras. He clicked to the next slide. The map zoomed in on the bunker entrance I'd just come through. This is Sector 7. This is where the real work happens. And this, Sergeant Whitfield, is where you'll be working for the foreseeable future. He clicked again. The map showed a cross-section view. The bunker entrance led to an elevator shaft. And that shaft went down, way down. I counted the levels on the screen. -1, -2, -3. It kept going. -7, -8, -9. We have 12 subterranean levels beneath this facility, Hendricks said. Each level is approximately 150 feet below the one above it. That means level -12 is 1,800 feet underground. You'll be working primarily on level -7. That's where we keep the primary containment units. I wanted to ask what they were containing, but I remembered his instruction not to ask questions unless invited. So I waited. Hendricks looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Tell me, Sergeant, do you believe in God? I didn't know how to answer that. I was raised Catholic, I said carefully, but I don't go to church much anymore. Hendricks nodded slowly. That's good, he said, because after you see what we're keeping down there, you won't believe at all. The first week was almost boring, and I think that was intentional. I think they wanted me to settle in, to get comfortable, to start believing that maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as Hendricks had made it sound. After that briefing, after he'd told me I wouldn't believe in God anymore after seeing what they kept down there, I was expecting to be thrown immediately into whatever nightmare waited on level -7. But that's not what happened. Instead, they assigned me to surface duty. Regular security work, guarding hangars, checking credentials, doing perimeter patrols around the above-ground facility. It was almost insulting, honestly. I'd been given all this build-up, all this dramatic introduction, and then they had me doing the exact same job I'd been doing at Nellis. I spent my days walking around aircraft hangars making sure nobody who wasn't supposed to be there got too close to the prototypes they were testing. Stealth drones, hypersonic test vehicles, some kind of experimental aircraft that looked like a flying wing with no visible propulsion system. Cool stuff, sure, classified stuff, but nothing that explained why I'd had to sign a document authorizing them to execute me if I talked. They housed me in the dormitory on Sector 1, the surface facility. My room was about what you'd expect, 10 by 12 feet, a narrow bed with military-issue sheets, a desk, a locker, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. There was no window. There was a ventilation grate that pumped in cold, filtered air 24 hours a day. There was a clock on the wall, but I noticed after the first day that it didn't match my sense of time. I'd look at it and think an hour had passed, but the clock said 20 minutes. Or I'd feel like I'd only been asleep for a few minutes, and I'd wake up to find 6 hours had gone by. I thought maybe I was just adjusting to the weird schedule they had us on, 12-hour shifts, rotating every 3 days between day and night duty. But later I found out the clock was deliberately wrong. They manipulated time perception in the dormitories, something about keeping people disoriented, making it harder to track how long you'd been there, preventing you from developing a routine that might make you feel too comfortable or too confident. Control through confusion. I met the other soldiers during meals. There were maybe 30 of us total assigned to Sector 7, though I didn't see all of them at once. We were on staggered schedules. Most of them were Air Force like me, but there were a few Army, a couple of Marines, even one Navy SEAL who apparently got transferred there after some mission went sideways in Afghanistan, and he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Nobody talked about their backgrounds much. That was one of the unwritten rules I picked up fast. You didn't ask questions about why someone was here or what they did before. You just acknowledged them, ate your food, and kept your mouth shut. But what struck me most about these guys wasn't what they said. It was how they looked. Every single one of them had the same expression. Empty, hollowed out. Like they were going through the motions of being human, but something essential had been scooped out of them. Their eyes didn't focus right. When you talked to them, they'd look at you, but it felt like they were looking through you, past you, at something on the other side of reality that you couldn't see. There was one guy I tried to befriend. His name was Coleman, Staff Sergeant, Army Ranger, built like a tank. He'd been at the facility for 8 months. We were on patrol together one night walking the perimeter fence, and I tried to make conversation. "So what's the deal with the sublevels?" I asked. Hendricks mentioned them in my briefing, but didn't explain what we're actually guarding down there. Coleman stopped walking. He turned to look at me, and his face had no expression at all. "Don't ask about the sublevels," he said. His voice was flat, mechanical. "You'll find out when they're ready to show you. Until then, don't think about it. Don't talk about it. Don't even wonder about it. Trust me, you'll sleep better." Then he started walking again, like the conversation had never happened. I tried asking other guys over the next few days. I'd bring it up casually, like I was just curious, just trying to understand my assignment. Every single time, I got the same response. Either they'd shut down completely and refuse to talk, or they'd tell me some version of what Coleman said. "Don't ask. You'll find out. Stop thinking about it." After a while, I stopped asking, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, because there were signs, little things that didn't add up, like the fact that every night around 0200 hours, you'd see a convoy of unmarked trucks roll through the main gate and drive straight to the bunker entrance. They'd go inside, and about an hour later, they'd come back out empty. What were they delivering? Supplies, maybe. Equipment. But why at 2 in the morning? Why the secrecy even within a secret facility? And then there were the sounds. That's what really got to me. At night, when everything was quiet, when the aircraft testing had stopped and the generators had cycled down to low power, you could hear it, a sound coming from below, deep, resonant, like a low-frequency hum that you felt in your chest more than heard with your ears. It would pulse. 3 seconds of sound, 2 seconds of silence, 3 seconds of sound, over and over, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The first time I heard it, I was lying in my bunk, trying to sleep. It was maybe 0300 hours. I'd been there 4 days. I woke up to that hum vibrating through the walls, and for a second, I thought it was my imagination, or maybe the ventilation system. Big facilities like this have massive HVAC systems that can create all kinds of weird noises, but this was different. This wasn't mechanical. Machines don't breathe. Machines don't have rhythm. This sound had intention behind it. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. The vibration was stronger there. It was coming from below, from deep below. I stood there in my underwear with my ear against the cold concrete, and I counted the pulses. I counted for 5 minutes straight. It never varied. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off. Perfectly consistent. Whatever was making that sound, it was either an incredibly precise machine, or it was alive. I mentioned it to Coleman the next day. Casual, like I was just making an observation. "You ever notice that humming sound at night? Sounds like it's coming from underground." He stopped what he was doing. He was cleaning his rifle, and looked at me with those empty eyes. "That's the ventilation system," he said. "It cycles at night when the power load is lower. You'll get used to it." But I could tell he was lying. His jaw was too tight. His hands had stopped moving. He knew what I was talking about, and he didn't want to talk about it, so I dropped it. But I didn't forget, and every night after that I listened. I timed it. I tried to figure out patterns. Was it louder on some nights than others? Did it change pitch? Was there ever more than one source of the sound, like multiple things breathing in unison? I became obsessed with it. I started losing sleep because I'd lie awake waiting for it to start, and then once it started, I couldn't stop listening. On the 7th night, my last night before they moved me to sublevel duty, the sound changed. I was lying there in the dark, and the rhythm that had been so consistent all week suddenly broke. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off. And then it went 4 seconds on. The pitch dropped lower, deeper, and the vibration was so strong it rattled the metal frame of my bunk. I sat up. My heart was pounding. And then I heard something else. A secondary sound underneath the hum. It sounded like voices, not words, not language, just vocal noise, moaning, screaming, but distant, muffled, like it was coming from behind a thick wall or from the bottom of a well. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then it stopped. The regular rhythm resumed. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off, like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on my bunk with my back against the wall and stared at the door and waited for morning. I kept telling myself it was the ventilation system. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that the stress and the lack of sleep and the disorientation from the fucked up clock were making me hear things that weren't there. But I knew, deep down, in that part of your brain that's older than language, older than civilization, the part that kept our ancestors alive by recognizing when a predator was nearby, that part knew. Something was down there, something massive, something alive, and I was about to meet it. The next morning, I got called into Hendrick's office. He was sitting behind his desk with that same calm expression, like he was about to tell me my shift schedule had changed, or I needed to update my personnel file. "Sergeant Whitfield," he said, "you've completed your orientation period. Your performance has been acceptable. Starting tonight, you'll begin your primary assignment on level -7. Report to Elevator Bank 3 at 2100 hours. Bring your sidearm and your clearance card. You'll be briefed on site." He looked at me like he was waiting for a response. I didn't have one. My mouth was dry. My hands felt cold. Finally, I managed to say, "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Good. One more thing, Sergeant. You're going to see things tonight that will challenge your understanding of reality. You're going to want to run. You're going to want to scream. You're going to want to close your eyes and pretend it's not real. Don't. Stay calm. Follow orders. And remember, you signed the document. You agreed to this. There's no walking away now." He stood up and extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was cold. "Welcome," he said, "to the real Area 51. 2100 hours came faster than I wanted it to. I spent the whole day in a fog, going through the motions of my surface duties but not really present. My mind kept circling back to that sound from the night before, those voices underneath the hum, and what Hendricks had said about challenging my understanding of reality. I've been in combat. I've seen people die. I've held a friend while he bled out from shrapnel wounds in a training accident that should never have happened. I thought I understood fear. I thought I knew what it meant to face something terrible. But walking toward Elevator Bank 3 that night, I realized I'd never actually been afraid before. Not like this. This was primal. This was the fear that makes animals freeze in place when they smell a predator. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, to run, to get as far away from that elevator as possible. But I kept walking, because Hendricks was right. I'd signed the document. I'd agreed to this, and there was no walking away. Elevator Bank 3 was in a section of the facility I'd never been to. It wasn't near the main bunker entrance where I'd first arrived. It was deeper in, past the hangars and dormitories, in a part of the complex that looked older. The walls there weren't painted concrete. They were raw rock, like the corridor had been carved directly into the mountain. The lighting was different too, dimmer, more yellow. It reminded me of old Cold War bunkers I'd seen in training videos, the kind built in the 1950s when they thought nuclear war was inevitable and they needed to preserve something of civilization underground. There were 2 guards outside the elevator, not regular security forces. These guys were different, bigger. They had that look that special operations guys have, like they've done things that would make normal soldiers quit. They were armed with weapons I didn't recognize, some kind of energy-based system maybe, with a power pack on their backs and a rifle that hummed when they moved. One of them checked my clearance card with a handheld scanner. Whitfield Marcus, Delta 9, first descent. He looked at his partner. Fresh meat. The other guard almost smiled. Almost. Try not to puke in the elevator, Sergeant. It's a long way down and we just cleaned it. The elevator doors opened. It wasn't a normal elevator. It was bigger, maybe 15 feet on each side, with reinforced steel walls and a floor that looked like it was made from some kind of non-slip composite material. There were handrails along all 4 walls. That should have been my first clue about what was coming. There was one other person inside, a woman in a white lab coat with an ID badge that said, Dr. Reeves, Xenobiology. She was maybe 40, with gray streaks in her black hair and the kind of tired eyes that come from not sleeping enough for years. She nodded at me but didn't speak. I stepped inside. The doors closed with a heavy pneumatic hiss. There was a control panel with buttons labeled by level, surface, -1, -2, all the way down to -12. The guard who'd checked my card reached in and pressed -7. Enjoy your shift, Sergeant, he said. The doors closed, and we started descending. For the first 30 seconds, it felt like a normal elevator, smooth, controlled, that gentle pressure in your stomach that comes from acceleration. But then, the speed increased, and kept increasing. I grabbed one of the handrails instinctively. Dr. Reeves was already holding on, her knuckles white. The elevator wasn't just descending, it was dropping. Fast. Faster than any elevator I'd ever been in. The pressure built in my ears like I was on an airplane taking off, except we were going down, not up. I tried to swallow to equalize the pressure. It didn't help. My ears popped once, twice, 3 times. The pain was sharp, sudden. I looked at Dr. Reeves. She had her eyes closed and was breathing slowly through her nose. She'd done this before. She knew what to expect. I didn't. The descent went on, and on, and on. I started counting seconds in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. I got to 100, and we were still dropping. 200, still dropping. 300, 400. The temperature started to change. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but no. The air was getting colder. I could see my breath. The metal handrail under my palm went from room temperature to cold to freezing. I pulled my hand away and saw condensation forming on the walls, little droplets running down the steel. We'd been descending for what felt like forever. I'd lost count somewhere around 600 seconds, 10 minutes. 10 straight minutes of dropping into the earth at high speed. Do you understand how deep that is? Elevators typically descend at maybe 10 feet per second. If we were going faster, and we were, I could feel it. We might have been doing 30, maybe 40 feet per second. 10 minutes at that speed. We were over 2 miles underground. 2 miles straight down into the earth. That's deeper than most mines. That's deeper than the deepest subway system in the world. That's deep enough that the weight of the rock above us should have crushed the elevator shaft. But it didn't. The elevator kept running. Smooth. controlled, like this was completely normal. At around the 12-minute mark, I felt the elevator start to slow. The deceleration was gradual but noticeable. My stomach lurched. Dr. Reeves opened her eyes and straightened up, letting go of the handrail. She looked at me. "First time down?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, clinical. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. "The pressure equalization is the worst part," she said. "Your ears will be ringing for about an hour, and you might feel nauseous. That's normal. Try not to throw up until after you leave the elevator." She said it like she was giving medical advice, like this was routine. Maybe for her it was. The elevator continued to slow. 13 minutes, 14 minutes. Then finally, with a gentle hydraulic hiss, it stopped. The doors didn't open immediately. There was a pause. I heard something on the other side of the doors. A mechanical sound, like locks disengaging. Heavy locks. Multiple layers of them. Clunk, clunk, clunk. 3 separate mechanisms unlocking in sequence. Then a hiss of pressurization, like an airlock equalizing. Then, finally, the doors slid open. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't bad, exactly. It wasn't rot or decay or anything organic. It was wrong, chemical, sterile, but not clean. Like the air in a hospital mixed with ozone and something else I couldn't identify. Something that made the back of my throat itch. The second thing was the light. The corridor beyond the elevator wasn't lit with normal fluorescent bulbs or LEDs. It was illuminated with strips of violet light embedded in the ceiling and walls. Not ultraviolet. I'd worked with UV lights before. This was something else. A color that sat right on the edge of what human eyes can perceive. It hurt to look at. Not physically painful, but uncomfortable, like staring at an optical illusion for too long. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and they weren't concrete. They were some kind of dark stone I didn't recognize, shot through with veins of something that glowed faintly in the violet light, and carved into those walls, etched deep into the stone, were symbols. I'm not talking about graffiti or warning signs. These were symbols that looked ancient, geometric patterns that didn't make sense, spirals and angles and shapes that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that violated basic geometry. Looking at them made my eyes hurt, made my head hurt. It was like my brain was trying to process information it wasn't designed to handle. I stared at one symbol, a series of interlocking triangles that formed a pattern that looked three-dimensional even though it was carved flat into the wall, and I felt dizzy, nauseous, like the floor was tilting even though I knew it wasn't. I had to look away. Dr. Reeves stepped out of the elevator like nothing was wrong. "Don't stare at the glyphs," she said without looking back at me. "They're containment markers. Part of the dimensional anchoring system. If you look at them too long, you'll start seeing things that aren't there, or things that are there but shouldn't be. Either way, it's not good for you." She started walking down the corridor. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. The corridor stretched ahead for maybe 100 yards before ending in another heavy door. The walls pulsed. I swear to God they pulsed. Not physically, they weren't moving, but the light in them, those glowing veins, they brightened and dimmed in a rhythm. 3 seconds bright, 2 seconds dim, 3 seconds bright, 2 seconds dim. The same rhythm as the sound I'd been hearing at night, the breathing sound. It was coming from here, from this level, from whatever was behind that door at the end of the corridor. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dr. Reeves kept walking at a steady pace, her shoes clicking on the stone floor. I wanted to ask her what was behind the door, what we were walking toward, what I was about to see. But I couldn't form the words. My mouth was too dry. My throat felt like it was closing up. We were about halfway down the corridor when I noticed something else. The air pressure was wrong. It felt heavy, dense, like the atmosphere was thicker down here. Every breath took effort, like I was breathing through a wet cloth. And there was a sound underneath everything. Beneath the hum, beneath the rhythm of the pulsing lights, there was something else. A whisper. No, not a whisper. Whispers, plural. Dozens of them, hundreds of them. Voices so quiet I couldn't make out words, but I could feel them. They were coming from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls, from the air, from inside my own head. I stopped walking. Dr. Reeves turned back to look at me. "Sergeant Whitfield," she said. Her voice was calm, flat. "What you're hearing is psychic bleed. The entities we keep on this level exist partially outside of normal space-time. Their presence creates ripples in the quantum field. Your brain is interpreting those ripples as sensory input. It's not real. It's not dangerous. Ignore it. She turned and kept walking, but I knew she was lying. Because those voices weren't random noise. They weren't quantum field ripples. They were words. I couldn't understand them, but they were words, and they were directed at me. We reached the door. It was massive, 30 feet tall, made from the same dark stone as the walls, with more of those symbols carved into its surface. Dr. Reeves pressed her hand to a panel beside the door. A scanner swept across her palm, her face, her eyes. Then it beeped. A voice, computerized, female, said, "Identity confirmed. Dr. Sarah Reeves. Clearance level Omega. Access granted. Warning. Containment protocols active. Psychological protection recommended." The door began to open, not by sliding, not by swinging. It split down the middle and the two halves receded into the walls, and as they did, I saw that the door was at least 3 feet thick. Behind it was another corridor, but this one was different. This one had windows, or what looked like windows, panels of transparent material set into the walls at regular intervals, and behind those panels, I saw them, the cells, the containment units, and inside those cells, I saw something that made every rational thought in my head shut down, something that proved Dr. Reeves was wrong when she said the whispers weren't dangerous, because what I saw behind those windows wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible, and it was looking at me. Dr. Reeves led me past that first window without stopping. I tried to look inside as we passed, tried to see what was in there, but she grabbed my arm, hard. Her fingers dug into my bicep with surprising strength. "Don't," she said. "Not yet. Not until you've been briefed. If you look directly at them without preparation, without understanding what you're seeing, your mind will try to process it and fail. I've seen it happen. Strong men, trained soldiers like you, they look into those cells and their brains just break. They start screaming and they don't stop. We have to sedate them, ship them off to psychiatric facilities where they spend the rest of their lives in padded rooms, muttering about angles and eyes and things that shouldn't exist. So don't look. Not yet." I pulled my gaze away from the window. My heart was hammering. We walked past 6 more cells. I counted them, before we reached a checkpoint station. It was a small room built into the corridor, with reinforced walls and a window that looked out over the cell block. Inside was another soldier, older than me, maybe 50, with Sergeant First Class stripes and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't acknowledge us when we entered. Dr. Reeves spoke to him. "This is Sergeant Whitfield, first shift. He needs the standard briefing before he takes his post." The older sergeant looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were the same as the others I'd seen, empty, hollowed out. But there was something else in them too. Pity, maybe, or recognition. Like he was looking at a younger version of himself and remembering what it felt like to be new. "Sit down, Sergeant," he said. His voice was rough, like he'd been smoking for decades. I sat in one of the metal chairs. Dr. Reeves left without another word. The door sealed behind her with that same pneumatic hiss. The older sergeant pulled up a chair across from me. "My name is SFC Garrett," he said. "I've been on level -7 for 3 years. I'm going to tell you how to survive your shift. Listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once, and if you fuck it up, you won't get a second chance." He pulled out a laminated card from his pocket and set it on the table between us. It had 7 rules printed on it. "These are your operational protocols," he said. Rule 1. Do not look directly at the entities in the containment cells for more than 5 seconds at a time. If you need to observe them, use peripheral vision. If you stare too long, they'll notice. And trust me, you don't want them to notice you. Rule 2. Do not respond if you hear voices. You will hear voices. Everyone does. They'll sound like people you know, your mother, your brother, your dead friend from basic training. They'll call your name. They'll beg for help. They'll threaten you. Ignore all of it. The entities can access your memories and use them against you. If you respond, if you acknowledge the voices, you give them a foothold in your mind. Rule 3. Do not touch the containment barriers under any circumstances. They look like glass. They're not. They're a form of solidified energy that exists at the intersection of multiple dimensions. If you touch them, the barrier will destabilize, and you'll either be pulled into the cell, or the entity will be pulled out. Either way, you're dead. He pointed to Rule 4. Do not attempt to communicate with the entities. Do not make gestures. Do not write messages. Do not try to be clever. They are not aliens. They are not prisoners who might negotiate with you. They are predators, and you are prey. The only reason they don't consume you immediately is because the containment system prevents it. But if you give them any opening, any weakness, they will exploit it. Rule 5. If you experience any of the following symptoms, report immediately to medical. Auditory hallucinations that persist after your shift. Visual distortions that make straight lines appear curved. The sensation that your body is not entirely your own. The compulsion to open a cell door. These are signs of psychic contamination. If caught early, it can be treated. If ignored, you'll become a liability and you'll be reassigned to level -8. You don't want to know what happens on level -8. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten when he mentioned it. Rule 6. Your shift is 4 hours. No more, no less. We've calculated that 4 hours is the maximum safe exposure time for unshielded personnel. After 4 hours, the quantum field disruption caused by proximity to the entities begins to cause permanent neurological damage. You'll feel fine. You'll think you can handle more. You can't. When your shift ends, you leave immediately. No lingering. No, just 1 more minute. You get in the elevator and you go back to surface level. Rule 7. If a containment breach occurs, if you hear the alarm, if you see the red lights activate, you do not try to be a hero. You do not try to re-establish containment. You run to the nearest emergency exit and you seal it behind you. The entities are not like normal prisoners. They don't escape through doors. They escape through perception. If enough people see them, if enough minds acknowledge their existence simultaneously, they can force themselves into full physical manifestation. We've had 3 containment breaches in the last 15 years. 2 of them were contained within minutes. The 3rd one, he trailed off. We lost an entire shift. 19 people. They weren't killed. They were converted, turned into something else. We had to incinerate the bodies because they wouldn't stop moving. He picked up the laminated card and handed it to me. Keep this with you at all times. You'll think you remember the rules. You won't. The entities mess with your memory. They make you forget what you're supposed to do. If you're confused, if you're not sure what to do, read the card. Now, here's the practical part. Your post is Station 7C. It's 50 yards down the corridor, just past Cell 9. You'll be in a reinforced observation booth. Your job is simple. Watch the cells, monitor for any signs of increased activity, and log anything unusual in the digital system. There's a computer terminal in the booth. You enter your observations every 30 minutes. If you see movement inside a cell, you note it. If you hear the whispers getting louder, you note it. If you feel like you're being watched, you note it. Everything gets logged. Everything gets analyzed. We're trying to understand them, trying to find weaknesses, trying to figure out how to kill them if it comes to that. He stood up. Any questions? I had about 1,000 questions, but I asked the only one that mattered. What are they? Garrett looked at me for a long moment. We call them Archons, he said. The scientists call them extra-dimensional parasitic entities. The religious folks who've seen them call them demons. Call them whatever you want. The point is, they're not from here. They don't exist the way we exist. They're partially outside of our reality, partially outside of time. They feed on suffering, human suffering specifically, emotional pain, physical agony, psychological despair. That's food to them, energy. The more intense the suffering, the stronger they become. And they've been here a long time, longer than humans, maybe longer than life on Earth. We didn't capture them in 1947 like the official story says. They let us capture them. They wanted to be here. Because this facility, this prison, it's not keeping them away from humanity. It's giving them access to a concentrated food source. He opened the door. Welcome to the farm, Sergeant. Try not to become livestock. I walked to my post in a daze. Station 7C was exactly where Garrett said it would be. A small booth with reinforced walls and a window that looked out over the corridor. Inside was a metal chair, a computer terminal, a logbook, and a panic button on the wall labeled Containment Breach, Emergency Only. I sat down. The chair was cold. Everything was cold down here. I could see 3 cells from my position, numbers 7, 8, and 9. The containment barriers covering them looked like glass. But Garrett was right. They weren't. They had a strange quality to them, like they were flowing, not liquid, not solid, something in between. The surface rippled occasionally, like a pond disturbed by a breeze, even though there was no air movement down here. And behind those barriers, in the darkness of the cells, I could see shapes, vague, indistinct, moving in ways that didn't make sense. The first hour was the worst, not because anything happened, because nothing happened. It was just silence. That heavy, oppressive silence that makes you hyper-aware of every sound your body makes. Your breathing, your heartbeat, the creak of the chair when you shift your weight. I kept my eyes on the cells, but I didn't look directly at them. Peripheral vision, like Garrett said. I logged my first observation at the 30-minute mark. No unusual activity. Entities appear dormant. At the 60-minute mark, same. No movement detected. I was starting to relax, starting to think maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe the horror stories were exaggerated. Maybe I could handle this. That's when I heard my name. Marcus. A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. I froze. Marcus, please. I need help. I knew that voice. It was my ex-wife, Sarah. The same tone she used when she was scared, when she needed me. But Sarah was in California. Sarah hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. This wasn't real. Rule 2. Do not respond if you hear voices. I kept my eyes on the computer screen and didn't move. Marcus, why won't you look at me? The voice was closer now, right behind me. I could feel breath on the back of my neck. Cold breath. Impossible, because there was no one else in the booth. I gripped the armrests of my chair and forced myself to stay still. I know you can hear me, the voice said. It didn't sound like Sarah anymore. It was changing, deepening, becoming something else. I know what you did. I know what you're afraid of. I know about the night in Kabul. I know about the civilian you killed, the one who wasn't armed, the one who was just trying to protect his family. My heart stopped. I'd never told anyone about that. It was buried in a classified report that no one would ever read. How did... No. Stop. It's not real. It's accessing your memories. Rule 2. Do not respond. The voice laughed. It wasn't a human laugh. It was the sound of breaking glass and grinding metal. Look at me, Marcus. Turn around and look at me. I want to show you what you really are. I didn't turn around, but I made a mistake. I looked up. I looked at cell number 8, and the thing inside was pressed against the barrier, staring at me. I can't describe what I saw. Language doesn't have words for it. It wasn't a shape. It was the absence of shape. It was geometry that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Angles that folded through themselves. Surfaces that were concave and convex simultaneously. And eyes. God, the eyes. Not organs, not biological structures, just points of awareness. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, looking at me from directions that didn't exist. I felt something break in my head, a pressure that built and built until I thought my skull would crack. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. The thing was holding my gaze somehow, forcing me to see it, forcing me to understand what I was looking at. And the more I understood, the less sense it made. My vision started to fragment. The booth was overlapping with other places, other times. I saw the corridor, but I also saw a desert. I saw an ocean. I saw cities that had never been built and ruins of civilizations that had never existed. All of it at once, all of it occupying the same space. I vomited. The pressure released and I doubled over, retching onto the floor. My whole body was shaking. I could taste blood in my mouth. I'd bitten my tongue without realizing it. Alarms were going off somewhere. Red lights flashing. I heard footsteps running. The door to the booth opened and hands grabbed me, pulled me up, dragged me out into the corridor. I couldn't walk. My legs weren't working right. Someone was shouting, but the words didn't make sense. They put me in a wheelchair. When did they get a wheelchair? And pushed me back toward the elevator. I looked back once. Cell number 8. The barrier was glowing brighter than the others, and the thing inside was still watching me, still holding part of my attention even as they pulled me away. I could feel it in my head, a presence, a voice that wasn't sound. It said, "We'll speak again, Marcus. You're ours now." Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a medical bay somewhere on the surface level. There was an IV in my arm. A doctor I didn't recognize was checking my vitals. "Welcome back, Sergeant," he said. His voice was too cheerful. "You lasted 90 minutes. That's better than most first-timers. We gave you a Class B sedative and a neurological stabilizer. You'll feel disoriented for a few hours. That's normal. Try to rest." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't work. He patted my shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll go back down tomorrow. It gets easier, eventually." But I knew he was lying. It would never get easier, because now I knew what was down there. And worse, now they knew me. I woke up 16 hours later in a private room on the surface level. My head felt like someone had taken a drill to it. Every light was too bright. Every sound was too loud. The IV was still in my arm, pumping something clear into my bloodstream, Probably more sedatives to keep me calm while my brain tried to process what it had seen. There was a tray of food on the table next to my bed. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. I didn't touch it. I couldn't imagine eating. My stomach was still churning from the memory of that thing in cell 8. Those impossible angles. Those eyes that looked at me from directions that shouldn't exist. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. And worse, I could still feel it. Like it had left a fingerprint on my consciousness. A presence in the back of my mind that whispered in a language I didn't understand, but somehow knew was about me, about what I'd done, about what I was going to become. Captain Hendricks came in around 1400 hours. He pulled up a chair and sat down next to my bed like we were old friends having a casual conversation. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" he asked. I didn't answer. What was I supposed to say? That I felt like my understanding of reality had been shattered? That I was questioning whether I was even the same person who'd walked into that cell block? He nodded like I'd spoken anyway. "The first encounter is always the hardest," he said. "Your brain is trying to reconcile what you saw with what it knows is possible. It can't. That's why you collapsed. The human mind isn't designed to perceive entities that exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It's like trying to see in 4 dimensions when you only have 3-dimensional vision. The data doesn't fit, so your brain shuts down to protect itself." He stood up and checked the IV bag. "The sedative we gave you helps with that. It temporarily suppresses the parts of your brain that try to make logical sense of things. Lets you observe without analyzing. We'll keep you on a low dose for the next few weeks until your mind adapts." "Adapts to what?" I finally managed to say. My voice sounded wrong, hoarse. Hendricks looked at me. "To the knowledge that everything you thought you knew about the universe is wrong," he said simply. "That humanity is not the dominant species on this planet. That we never were. That there are things older than us, more powerful than us, and we only exist because they allow us to exist. Most people can't accept that. Their egos won't let them. But you're military. You understand chain of command. You understand that sometimes you're not at the top. Sometimes you're just a grunt following orders from forces you can't see and don't understand. That's humanity's position in the real hierarchy. We're grunts. And the Archons," he gestured vaguely downward, toward the sublevels. "They're the officers. Or they were. Until we figured out how to trap them." He checked his watch. "You've been cleared for a briefing. Get dressed. I'll wait outside." He left. I sat there for a moment staring at the wall, then forced myself out of bed. My legs were shaky but functional. There were clean fatigues folded on a chair. Someone had brought them while I was unconscious. I got dressed slowly, every movement feeling like I was operating a body that didn't quite belong to me anymore. When I opened the door, Hendricks was waiting in the corridor. He led me through a maze of passages I didn't recognize, past security checkpoints and sealed doors, until we reached a conference room deep in the facility. Inside were 5 other people, 3 men in Air Force uniforms with ranks I didn't recognize, probably intelligence or some classified branch. 1 woman in a black suit with a badge that said Department of Energy, but I knew that was a cover for something else. And 1 older man, maybe 70, in civilian clothes. No ID, no badge. Just a face that looked like it had been keeping secrets for decades. Hendricks gestured for me to sit. I took a chair at the end of the table. The woman in the suit spoke first. "Sergeant Whitfield, what you're about to see is classified at a level above top secret. This information is compartmentalized under Project Paradigm, an umbrella operation that encompasses all extra-dimensional entity research and containment. Fewer than 200 people in the world know what you're about to learn. The disclosure of this information to unauthorized personnel is punishable by immediate termination." The way she said termination, I knew she didn't mean I'd lose my job. "Do you understand?" I nodded. She pressed a button on a remote. The lights dimmed. A projector screen descended from the ceiling. And then I saw it. Footage. Black and white. Grainy. Old. Very old. The date stamp in the corner said July 8th, 1947. Roswell, New Mexico. "This is the actual footage from the Roswell incident," the woman said. "Not the weather balloon story. Not the Project Mogul cover story. This is what really happened. The video showed a desert field at night. There were military vehicles, soldiers running around, spotlights cutting through the darkness, and in the center of all the activity was something on the ground. It wasn't a spacecraft. It wasn't a crashed vehicle of any kind. It was a structure, a geometric shape that hurt to look at even through decades-old camera footage. The same impossible angles I'd seen in Cell 8, the same surfaces that existed in too many dimensions at once. The soldiers were surrounding it with equipment, cables, generators, things that looked like massive Tesla coils. And then the video showed them activating the equipment. Lightning arced from the coils toward the structure. The structure began to pulse, to shrink, to fold in on itself in ways that made my head hurt. And then it was gone. Just gone. The field was empty, except for a crater and some scorch marks. What you just watched, the older civilian said, was humanity's first successful capture of an Archon. His voice was quiet, measured. It took us 3 years to develop the technology to contain them. 3 years of theory, experimentation, and a lot of dead researchers who got too close to something they didn't understand. But we did it. We figured out how to create a dimensional anchor, a field that pins an Archon to a specific point in space-time and prevents it from phasing back into its native dimension. The structure you saw wasn't a spacecraft. It was an Archon in a semi-physical state. They can't fully manifest in our dimension without an enormous amount of energy, but they can partially manifest, take on pseudo-physical forms. The Roswell Archon had been feeding on human suffering for decades. Wars, disasters, the Depression. It was strong enough to appear in the physical world for short periods. That made it visible, and visibility made it vulnerable. One of the military officers leaned forward. The crash wasn't a crash, it was a trap. We'd been tracking unusual energy signatures across the Southwest for months. Spikes in quantum field fluctuations that correlated with major tragedies. Mining accidents, train derailments, murders. We realized something was feeding on the death and suffering, so we created more. Deliberately, we staged a disaster, a bus accident, 40 people dead, and we waited. The Archon came to feed, and when it manifested to absorb the suffering, we hit it with the dimensional anchor, locked it down, dragged it back here, and we've been studying it ever since. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a cell, one of the cells from level -7. Inside was a shape that writhed and pulsed. The Roswell Archon is in cell 12. It's been there for 77 years, and it's not alone. Between 1947 and 1962, we captured 17 more, different sizes, different capabilities, but all the same basic nature, extra-dimensional parasites that feed on human suffering. I found my voice. Why are we keeping them alive? The question came out harsher than I intended. If they're parasites, if they're feeding on us, why not kill them? Why build a prison? Why guard them? The room went quiet. The officers looked at each other. The woman in the suit looked at the old civilian. He smiled slightly. Because we don't know if they can be killed, he said. We've tried. Believe me, we've tried. Conventional weapons do nothing. Nuclear radiation does nothing. We've exposed them to temperatures that would vaporize steel. We've subjected them to pressure that would crush diamond. They don't even notice. They exist partially outside our physical laws. Anything we do to their physical manifestation is like trying to kill a human by stabbing their shadow. You're not hitting the real thing, just a projection of it. He clicked to another slide. This one showed a lab. Scientists in protective gear working with equipment I didn't recognize. But that's not the only reason we keep them alive. The other reason, Hendricks said, is that they have something we need. Knowledge, technology. The Archons exist across multiple dimensions. They can perceive reality in ways we can't. They understand physics, mathematics, quantum mechanics at a level that's thousands of years beyond our current science. And they can be convinced to share that knowledge in exchange for food. The screen changed. Now it showed a series of images. Technology, devices, schematics. I recognized some of them. Laser technology, the woman said. Developed in 1960, officially invented by Theodore Maiman, actually derived from information extracted from the Roswell Archon. Fiber optic cables, 1970. Quantum computers, 1998. Advanced metamaterials, room temperature superconductors, zero-point energy extraction. Every major technological leap in the last 70 years can be traced back to information we got from the Archons. She looked at me. How do you think we won the Cold War, Sergeant? How do you think America became the dominant superpower? It wasn't capitalism. It wasn't democracy. It was this. We had access to technology that the Soviets didn't, because we had Archons, and they didn't. Jesus Christ, I said. The old civilian shook his head. God has nothing to do with this. In fact, after you understand what the Archons really are, what they represent, you'll realize that the concept of God, a benevolent creator who cares about humanity, is a fairy tale we tell ourselves to cope with the truth. The truth is that we're livestock. We always have been. The Archons have been here since before recorded history. Every myth, every demon story, every tale of monsters in the dark, they're all descriptions of Archons feeding. The Black Plague, the World Wars, the Holocaust. Every mass tragedy in human history has been accompanied by Archon activity. They create the conditions for suffering, or they take advantage of suffering that occurs naturally, and they feed. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. We only captured a few of them. The rest are still out there, still feeding, still shaping human history in ways we're only beginning to understand. I felt sick again. So what's the point? If they're out there, if they're controlling everything, if we're just food, what's the point of any of this? What's the point of capturing a few of them? Hendricks leaned forward. The point is leverage. Every Archon we capture is one less predator in the wild, one less entity feeding on humanity uncontrolled. And more importantly, every captured Archon is a source of information. We're learning, slowly, how they work, how they think, what they want. And eventually, we'll learn how to kill them, or how to drive them away, or how to break free of them entirely. But that takes time. It takes research. And it takes sacrifices. He looked at me with those empty eyes. Do you understand now why this facility exists? Why we do what we do? We're not the villains here, Sergeant. We're trying to save humanity. We're just doing it in a way that most people couldn't stomach if they knew the truth. The woman stood up. You'll return to level -7 tomorrow for another shift. Your body needs to acclimate to the exposure. Your mind needs to build tolerance to their presence. It will be difficult, but you'll adapt. Everyone does. Eventually, she gathered her papers and left. The military officers followed. The old civilian stayed for a moment longer. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. I know what you're thinking, he said. You're thinking about running, about refusing to go back down there, about trying to escape this place and tell the world what's happening. Don't. You won't make it. And even if you did, even if you somehow got out and started talking, no one would believe you. You'd be dismissed as crazy. And then you'd be quietly disappeared. Not because we're evil, but because the truth about the Archons would cause global panic. Society would collapse, and in the chaos, the Archons outside would feed like never before. Billions would die. So we keep the secret, we do the ugly work, and we tell ourselves that the end justifies the means. He walked to the door, then paused. Get some rest, Sergeant. Tomorrow you'll see where we get their food. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those impossible shapes, those eyes watching me from angles that shouldn't exist. And I kept thinking about what the old civilian had said. Tomorrow you'll see where we get their food. Food. He'd said it so casually, like he was talking about restocking a cafeteria. But the Archons didn't eat normal food. They fed on suffering, human suffering, which meant somewhere in this facility, there were people suffering, deliberately, systematically. And I was about to see it. The clock on my wall, the one that lied about time, said 0600 when Hendricks came to get me. Get dressed, Sergeant, he said through the door. Wear your fatigues and bring your sidearm. Level -8 has different protocols than -7. I got dressed like a robot. My hands moved, but my brain wasn't connected to them. I holstered my Glock, the same weapon I'd carried for 12 years, the same weapon that had felt like an extension of my arm. Now it felt foreign. What good was a gun against things that existed outside of physical reality? We took the elevator down, past level -7 where the Archons were kept. The descent continued. 8 minutes this time. Not as deep as the main containment level, but deep enough. When the doors opened, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Level -7 had smelled wrong. Chemical, sterile, alien. But level -8 smelled human. Sweat, unwashed bodies, fear. You know that smell that hospitals have in the oncology wards? That mixture of antiseptic and decay and desperation? It was like that, but worse. Concentrated, like the air itself was saturated with human misery. The corridor was different too. No violet lighting, just harsh white fluorescence that made everything look washed out and dead. The walls were painted institutional beige. There were doors along both sides of the corridor, heavy steel doors with small reinforced windows at eye level. And from behind those doors I heard sounds, crying, screaming, begging, human voices in various states of distress, not constant, not all at once, but rhythmic, like it was being orchestrated. Hendricks led me past the first few doors without stopping. I tried not to look through the windows, but I couldn't help it. In the first cell, I saw a man, maybe 30 years old, emaciated, curled in the corner with his hands over his ears. He was rocking back and forth, muttering something I couldn't make out. In the second cell, a woman stood motionless in the center of the room, staring at nothing. Her hospital gown was soaked with sweat. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't seeing anything in this reality. Whatever she was experiencing was happening inside her head. In the third cell, and this is what made me stop walking, what made my breath catch in my throat, was a child, a girl, maybe 8 years old. She was sitting on a cot with her knees pulled to her chest, crying silently. No sound, just tears running down her face. She looked up as I passed, and for a moment our eyes met, and I saw nothing in them. No hope, no fear, just emptiness, like her soul had been scooped out and what remained was just a shell going through the motions of being alive. "Don't stop," Hendrik said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "You can't help them, and standing there staring just makes it worse for you and for them." I forced myself to keep walking, but I counted the doors as we passed. 23 on the left side, 23 on the right, 46 cells. 46 human beings locked in steel boxes in a facility 2 miles underground where no one would ever find them. We reached a security checkpoint at the end of the corridor. Another guard in unmarked black tactical gear checked our credentials and waved us through. Beyond the checkpoint was a different section. This area looked more like a medical facility. White walls, tile floors, the smell of disinfectant trying and failing to mask something worse underneath. There were observation rooms with one-way mirrors looking into what I can only describe as torture chambers. Not medieval torture, not crude physical brutality. This was something more sophisticated, more precise, more cruel. Hendrik stopped in front of one of the observation windows. "This is where we generate the product," he said. Product. He called it product, like we were in a factory. "Come here. You need to understand how this works." I stepped up to the window and looked through. The room beyond was about 20 feet square. White walls, white floor, white ceiling. No furniture except a chair in the center with restraints. And in that chair was a man, maybe 40, wearing a hospital gown, strapped down at the wrists and ankles. His head was fitted with some kind of device, a helmet, but not protective. This helmet had wires and electrodes, and what looked like fiber optic cables running from it to a control console outside the room. A technician sat at the console, monitoring screens I couldn't read from this distance. The man in the chair was screaming, not physically. His mouth was closed, but his body was convulsing against the restraints like he was being electrocuted. And his eyes, God, his eyes were wide open and full of more terror than I'd ever seen in a human face. "That's a nightmare engine," Hendrik said. He pointed to the helmet. "Version 3.7. We've been refining the technology for 20 years. It works by directly stimulating specific neural pathways in the brain, the ones associated with fear, pain, grief, despair. But it's not random, it's personalized. Before we put someone in the chair, we scan their memories. We catalog their traumas, their fears, their regrets, everything that causes them psychological pain. Then the engine constructs a virtual experience, tailored specifically to their psyche. It takes whatever hurts them most and amplifies it, loops it, forces them to relive their worst moments over and over with slight variations designed to prevent adaptation. The subject might experience subjective hours or even days of torment, while only minutes pass in real time. Time dilation through induced neurological stress. It's incredibly efficient." He said it like he was explaining how a car engine worked. Clinical, detached, proud even. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. The man in the chair had stopped convulsing. Now he was just trembling, shaking so hard the chair rattled, and then I saw it. The display panel outside the room, it had readouts, metrics, psychological distress coefficient, 847, cortisol saturation, 94%, emotional coherence, degradation, severe, harvest quality, exceptional, harvest. They were harvesting his suffering like it was a crop. "How long has he been in there?" I finally managed to ask. Hendricks checked a tablet. "This session, 42 minutes. But subjectively, from his perspective, he's been experiencing his nightmare for approximately 16 hours. We'll keep him in for another hour. Then we'll give him a 12-hour recovery period before the next session. We've found that spacing is optimal. Too frequent and the mind breaks completely, becomes catatonic, and the suffering loses intensity. Too infrequent and the subject starts to recover psychologically, which reduces yield. This schedule maintains maximum output while preserving the subject for extended use." "How extended?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. Hendricks scrolled through the tablet. This particular subject has been in the program for 8 months. We estimate he has another 4 to 6 months before permanent psychological collapse. After that, he'll be transferred to long-term containment, where his baseline suffering, the chronic despair of being trapped in a broken mind, will continue to provide lower-grade but sustainable output for years. He looked at me. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is evil. You're thinking we're monsters. But consider the alternative. The Archons need to feed. That's not negotiable. They exist. They're here. And if we don't feed them in a controlled way, they feed in uncontrolled ways. They influence world events. They create wars. They amplify conflicts. They turn human society into a suffering engine on a global scale. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, 9/11, all of them had Archon signatures. Spikes in quantum field disruption consistent with mass feeding. By containing some Archons here and feeding them directly, we reduce the pressure. We reduce the need for large-scale atrocities. We sacrifice dozens to save millions. I looked through the window again. The man in the chair was crying now, silent tears running down his face. His lips were moving. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could read the words. Please, please stop. Please let me die. I turned away. Who are they? I asked. The people here. Who are they? Hendricks led me away from the observation window, down another corridor. Carefully selected candidates, he said. Missing persons who won't be missed. Homeless individuals with no family. Undocumented immigrants. People from foreign countries with no extradition treaties. Occasionally, domestic criminals who've been black-bagged before trial. We have procurement teams in every major city. They identify suitable subjects, extract them, and transport them here. We process about 5 to 7 new subjects per month to replace the ones who burn out. It's a sustainable system. The subjects are screened for medical conditions, quarantined to prevent disease transmission, and psychologically profiled to determine optimal nightmare content. The whole operation is compartmentalized. The procurement teams don't know where the subjects go. The technicians running the engines don't know how the product is used. Only a handful of people understand the complete picture. We stopped in front of another window. This one looked into a larger room, a processing center. There were 10 chairs, 10 people strapped in, 10 helmets, 10 nightmares running simultaneously. And beyond them, I could see the machinery, pipes, conduits, systems that glowed with that same violet light from level -7. The suffering was being collected, concentrated, transformed into something the Archons could consume. This is the primary harvest facility, Hendricks said. The output from all 46 subjects is aggregated and refined through a quantum conversion process we don't fully understand. We got the blueprints from the Archons themselves in exchange for establishing the system. The refined suffering is then distributed to the containment cells on level -7 through those conduits. Each Archon receives a measured dose calibrated to keep it satiated but not empowered. Too little, and they start trying to break containment. Too much, and they become strong enough to potentially overwhelm the dimensional anchors. It's a delicate balance. I watched the people in the chairs. I watched their bodies strain against the restraints. I watched their faces contort in agony that no one else could see. And I thought about the girl I'd seen earlier, the one with the empty eyes. The 8-year-old who was probably in one of these chairs for hours every day, experiencing custom-designed nightmares built from her worst memories and fears. And I thought about Hendricks' justification, that this was necessary, that we were saving the world, that the math worked out, dozens sacrificed to save millions. And for a moment, God forgive me, for a moment I almost understood. Because if the alternative was another Holocaust, another world war, another mass atrocity on a scale that killed millions, wasn't this better? Wasn't controlled suffering of a few better than uncontrolled suffering of many? But then I looked at the man in the chair closest to the window, and he looked at me, through the glass, through the helmet, through the nightmare he was experiencing. He looked directly at me, and his lips formed words I'll never forget. You're one of them now. And I realized he was right. By being here, by witnessing this and not stopping it, by accepting the logic even for a moment, I'd become complicit. I'd become part of the machine that transformed human beings into fuel. Hendricks put his hand on my shoulder. Welcome to level -8, Sergeant, he said. Welcome to the farm. Hendricks led me to a control room that overlooked both the harvest facility and the distribution network. It was a strange space. half medical monitoring station, half something that looked like it belonged in a power plant. Banks of monitors showed vital signs from all 46 subjects: heart rate, blood pressure, brain activity displayed in real-time waves of color that pulsed and spiked with each surge of induced terror. But the most disturbing part was the central display, a massive screen that showed what I can only describe as an energy flow diagram. Lines of light, that same violet color from the Archon containment level, flowing from each subject through a network of crystalline tubes that ran through the walls and ceiling. The tubes weren't metal, they weren't glass, they were something else, something that looked solid, but also seemed to exist slightly out of phase with normal reality, like I was seeing them through a filter that made them shimmer and blur at the edges. A technician sat at the main console. She was maybe 30, wearing a white lab coat over military fatigues, with the kind of exhausted expression that comes from working too many consecutive shifts. She didn't look up when we entered. Her eyes were fixed on the monitors. "Status report," Hendricks said. The technician tapped a few keys. "All units operational. Current aggregate distress output is holding steady at 847 kilojoules per second. Conversion efficiency is 92%. Distribution to containment cells is nominal. Cell 7 is showing slightly elevated consumption. The entity there has been more active since yesterday's exposure incident." She glanced at me when she said that. She knew I was the exposure incident, the one who'd looked directly at the Archon in Cell 8 and collapsed. Cell 8 entity is also showing increased activity. Probable cause: successful imprint establishment with new personnel. Recommend psychological monitoring of Sergeant Whitfield for signs of external influence. "Noted," Hendricks said. He pointed to the screen. "Explain the process to the sergeant. He needs to understand how the system works." The technician finally looked at me. Her eyes were dead, just like all the others. "The nightmare engines induce a state of extreme psychological distress in the subjects," she said. Her voice was mechanical, like she'd given this explanation 100 times. "This distress generates measurable changes in brain chemistry, elevated cortisol, adrenaline, neurochemical cascades associated with fear and pain, but it also generates something else. Something we can't measure with conventional instruments. The Archons call it essence. We call it emotional energy or psychic radiation. Whatever you want to call it, it's real. It exists. And the subjects produce it when they suffer. The nightmare engines don't just cause suffering, they optimize it. They fine-tune the psychological trauma to maximize essence output. Think of it like refining crude oil into gasoline. Raw suffering is inefficient, but processed, concentrated, personalized suffering, that's high-grade fuel." She brought up a different screen. This one showed a three-dimensional model of the facility. Level -8, where we were standing. Level -7 above us, where the Archons were contained. And connecting them, a network of those crystalline tubes. The essence is collected through quantum field manipulation. We don't fully understand the physics. The technology came from the Archons themselves. But essentially, the tubes create a dimensional pathway that allows the essence to flow from the subjects here to the containment cells above. The tubes are made from what we call solidified space-time. They exist in our dimension and in the Archon's native dimension simultaneously. The essence flows through them like water through pipes, except it's not moving through space. It's moving through layers of reality. She zoomed in on one of the tubes. I could see the energy flowing through it, pulses of violet light traveling upward toward the containment level. Each Archon receives a calibrated dose based on its size, power level, and current state of agitation. Too little, and they begin attempting to breach containment. Too much, and they become strong enough to potentially overcome the dimensional anchors. I watched the screen, watched the essence flowing from the harvest chambers to the Archon cells, watched the metrics updating in real time. "How much do they need?" I asked. The technician checked her readouts. "Varies by entity. The Roswell Archon in Cell 12 is the largest and requires approximately 150 kilojoules per day. The smaller entities in cells 1 through 6 need about 30 to 50 kilojoules each. Total daily consumption across all 17 contained Archons is roughly 1.3 megajoules. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to the concentrated psychological suffering of about 50 people experiencing severe trauma simultaneously for 8 hours straight. We have 46 subjects, each producing an average of 18 to 20 kilojoules per day through controlled sessions. The math works out. Barely. She pulled up another display. But here's the critical part. If we stop feeding them, If the supply is interrupted for any reason, they start drawing on their own reserves. And when those reserves deplete after approximately 48 hours, they begin actively trying to breach containment. "Show him," Hendricks said quietly. The technician hesitated. "Sir, that footage is classified under—" "Show him," Hendricks repeated. "He's already seen the farm. He needs to understand what happens if the farm fails." The technician took a breath and pulled up a video file. The timestamp said March 17th, 2003. "This is security footage from level -7, she said. "There was a power failure that knocked out the distribution system for 73 hours. We had backup generators, but there was a failure in the quantum converter. The essence couldn't reach the containment cells. The Archons started to starve." She pressed play. The video showed a corridor I recognized, the same violet-lit hallway with the cell windows I'd walked through during my first shift. But something was wrong. The barriers weren't stable. They were flickering, pulsing, and behind them, the Archons were moving. Actually moving. Not the subtle shifts I'd seen before. This was aggressive, violent. They were throwing themselves against the barriers like animals trying to break out of cages. The video jumped forward. Timestamp now showing 72 hours after the initial failure. The barriers were failing. I could see cracks forming in them. Not physical cracks, but distortions. Places where reality was tearing. And then it happened. Cell 9. The barrier shattered. Not into pieces. It just stopped existing. One frame it was there, flickering but intact. The next frame it was gone. And the thing inside, the Archon, came through. The video quality degraded immediately. Static, visual artifacts, like the camera itself couldn't process what it was recording, but I could see shapes, forms, something that was expanding into the corridor, something that took up more space than the corridor should have been able to contain. And there were people in that corridor, guards, technicians, 19 of them, according to the after-action report. I watched them try to run, watched them scatter in every direction, but the Archon was faster. It didn't chase them. It didn't move toward them. It just was, suddenly, simultaneously, in all places, at once, touching all of them at the same time even though that was impossible. The video showed 4 seconds of footage after the breach. 4 seconds of the Archon in full manifestation in our reality. And in those 4 seconds, I watched 19 people stop being human. They didn't die. That would have been mercy. They didn't dissolve or disappear. They remained standing, still breathing, still moving, but something had changed. Something fundamental. The way they moved was wrong. Too fluid, too precise. Like their bodies were being operated by something that didn't understand human movement but was learning. And their faces, Jesus Christ, their faces. The expressions were gone, replaced by something else. A knowing, an awareness. They turned toward the camera, all 19 of them moving in perfect synchronization, and they looked directly into it. And I swear I could feel them looking at me through the recording, looking through time itself, acknowledging that I was watching them, that I knew what they'd become. The video cut to black. The technician's hands were shaking as she closed the file. "The containment team managed to re-establish the barrier after 4 seconds, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They used an emergency dimensional anchor, essentially overloaded the quantum field in that section to force the Archon back into its cell. But the 19 people who'd been exposed, they couldn't be saved. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. Not really. Medical examination showed normal brain activity, normal autonomic functions, hearts beating, lungs breathing, all systems operational, but neurological scans revealed something else. Additional neural patterns that shouldn't exist, structures in their brains that couldn't be explained by human biology. They weren't brain damage or tumors. They were additions, modifications. The Archon had touched them for 4 seconds, and that was enough to rewrite their basic neurological architecture. What happened to them? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Hendricks took over. We kept them in medical isolation for 3 weeks, studied them, tried to understand what had changed. They were conscious, aware. They could speak, but everything they said was wrong. They spoke in voices that weren't theirs. They knew things they couldn't know. Languages they'd never learned. Concepts in physics and mathematics that were decades beyond current understanding. And they all said the same thing when we asked them what they were experiencing. They said, "We are still here. We have always been here. You cannot see us, but we see you. And when you die, you will join us in the spaces between. You will become what we are. What you have always been destined to be. He paused, looked at the blank screen where the video had been. We couldn't risk keeping them. The psychological contamination was spreading. Other personnel who spent time near them started reporting similar symptoms, hearing voices, seeing impossible geometries, feeling like they were being watched from inside their own minds. So we made the decision to terminate. How do you terminate something that's not technically alive? I asked. Fire, Hendricks said simply. We incinerated the bodies at 3,000 degrees Celsius. Sustained heat for 6 hours until there was nothing left but ash. Even then, the ash had to be buried in a lead-lined container and placed in long-term storage because it still registered quantum field distortions. But the procedure worked. The contamination didn't spread beyond those 19. We updated our protocols after that, improved the redundancy on the power systems, established stricter limits on exposure time for personnel, mandated psychological screening after every shift, and we made absolutely sure that the feeding schedule was never interrupted again. Because now we know what happens when the Archons go hungry. They don't just escape, they convert. They turn people into extensions of themselves, into bridges between their dimension and ours. I looked at the monitors showing the harvest chambers, the 46 people strapped into chairs, the 46 nightmares running on loops, the steady flow of violet energy traveling through those crystalline tubes to feed the things contained above us. And I understood. This wasn't just a prison. This wasn't just a research facility. This was a deal with the devil. We kept the Archons contained, kept them satiated, kept them weak enough that they couldn't breach. And in exchange, they gave us technology. They gave us power. They gave us the ability to maintain American dominance in a world that was rapidly catching up. But the price was 46 people tortured continuously. The price was children with empty eyes. The price was becoming the monsters we were trying to contain. How long has this been running? I asked. The technician checked her records. The current harvest facility has been operational since 1987. Total subjects processed through the program in that time, approximately 2,300. Average survival time in the program, 9 months. Some last longer, some break faster. But the system works. The Archons stay contained. The technology keeps flowing. And the world keeps spinning in ignorance of what we're doing down here to keep them safe. Hendricks gestured toward the door. You've seen the complete operation now, Sergeant. Level -7, where the Archons are contained. Level -8, where we produce their food. You understand the stakes. You understand why this is necessary. Tomorrow, you'll return to your regular duties on the containment level. You'll guard the cells. You'll monitor for breaches. And you'll remember what you saw here today. Because if you ever hesitate, if you ever question whether this is worth it, if you ever think about refusing your orders or trying to expose this operation, remember those 19 people. Remember what 4 seconds of exposure did to them. And remember that the only thing standing between humanity and an Archon feeding frenzy that could kill millions is us. This facility, this program, these 46 people whose suffering keeps the monsters contained. He started walking toward the exit. I followed. But I looked back once at the monitors, at the harvest chambers, at the people trapped in custom nightmares designed to extract maximum suffering. And I thought about what the man in the chair had said. You're one of them now. He was right. There was no going back. I'd seen too much. I knew too much. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, by staying here, by continuing to work in this facility, by accepting the logic and the necessity and the mathematics of suffering, I was complicit. I was part of the machine. And God help me, I didn't know what to do about it. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't just follow orders and accept what they told me. Couldn't sleep knowing what was happening 2 miles beneath the desert, while the world went about its business, thinking humanity was safe, thinking we were the dominant species, thinking our history was our own. 3 days after seeing the harvest facility, I made a decision that would either get me killed or get me answers. I needed to know more. Not the sanitized briefings, not the official explanations. I needed to see the raw data, the classified archives, the things they weren't telling us. So I did something stupid. I bribed a supply clerk named Patterson, who had access to the administrative networks. Cost me $2,000, all the money I had in my savings account, and I exploited a security flaw I'd noticed during my surface duties. The biometric scanners had a 60-second delay between shifts when they recalibrated. If you timed it right, if you had someone's access card and you knew their schedule, you could slip through during that window. Patterson got me a cloned card belonging to Dr. Reeves. I waited until her shift ended at 2200 hours, and I walked into a section of the facility I had no authorization to enter. The archives were on level -2, not as deep as the containment levels, but deep enough that casual personnel never went there. The room was climate-controlled, dimly lit, with rows of filing cabinets and computer terminals that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 1990s. Everything down here was analog or air-gapped from external networks. No digital traces, no remote access. If you wanted information, you had to physically be here. I sat down at one of the terminals and used Dr. Reeves's credentials to log in. The system accepted them without question, and suddenly I had access to everything. Project files, historical records, research data going back to 1947. I started with the earliest documents, reports from the Roswell capture, scientific analysis of the first Archon, early attempts to communicate with it, and then I found something that made my blood run cold. A file dated October 15, 1952. Classification: Beyond Top Secret, Eyes Only. Title: Operation Harvest, Historical Analysis and Future Protocols. The document was 247 pages long. I didn't have time to read all of it. I had maybe 20 minutes before someone noticed the irregular access on Dr. Reeves's account, so I skimmed. I jumped between sections, and what I found rewrote everything I thought I knew about human history. The first section was titled Temporal Analysis of Entity Presence. It contained data from quantum field measurements taken at various historical sites, archaeological digs, ancient battlefields, sites of major catastrophes, and every single location showed the same signature: quantum field distortions consistent with Archon presence. The Black Plague outbreak of 1347. Field distortion detected at 14 major infection sites across Europe. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century. Field distortion patterns matching the geographic spread of the destruction. The fall of Rome. The burning of the Library of Alexandria. The Crusades. The Spanish Inquisition. Every major human tragedy in recorded history had an Archon signature. They'd been there, feeding, growing stronger on the concentrated suffering of millions, but it went back further. Much further. The document included analysis of sites dating back thousands of years. The destruction of Pompeii in 79 AD, massive field distortion detected in ash samples. The siege of Carthage in 146 BC, quantum anomalies in the ruins. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC, when multiple civilizations across the Mediterranean mysteriously failed simultaneously. Coordinated field distortions across 3 continents. Going back even further, evidence of Archon presence during the construction of megalithic sites. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 9600 BC. The document suggested these sites might not have been temples or astronomical observatories like archaeologists thought. They might have been containment attempts. Ancient humans trying to trap or ward off the Archons using primitive understanding of dimensional physics. Stone circles, sacred geometry, symbols carved into rock that matched the containment markers we used on level -7. Our ancestors knew. They knew something was out there, something that fed on their suffering, and they tried to fight it with the only tools they had. The next section destroyed me. It was titled Origin Hypothesis, Consensus Assessment. The document laid out the working theory developed by the project's scientific team over decades of research. The Archons weren't aliens. They weren't invaders from another planet. They were native to Earth, or more accurately, they existed in a dimensional layer adjacent to Earth, a parallel reality that intersected with ours at specific points. They'd always been here, and humanity, according to the evidence presented in this document, had not evolved naturally. The timeline didn't match. The archaeological record showed too many gaps, too many sudden leaps in cognitive ability and social complexity. The document proposed something that made me want to vomit. It proposed that humanity was engineered, that somewhere around 300,000 years ago, something modified early hominids to increase their capacity for complex thought, for language, for imagination. And why? Because complex consciousness creates complex suffering. Animals suffer, but their suffering is simple, immediate, physical. They don't have existential dread. They don't have regret or guilt or shame or despair. But humans? We suffer in 1,000 different ways. We suffer about the past. We suffer about the future. We create elaborate narratives of suffering that have nothing to do with immediate physical reality. And that complexity makes our suffering more nutritious, more potent as food for dimensional parasites. Homo sapiens, the document read, represents the optimal balance between cognitive complexity and reproductive sustainability. A species intelligent enough to generate high-quality suffering, but not intelligent enough to perceive its true purpose until too late. Population growth curves suggest intentional cultivation over millennia, with periodic harvest events, wars, plagues, genocides, occurring whenever population density reached optimal levels for maximum yield. Conclusion: humanity is not an emergent species competing for dominance on Earth. Humanity is livestock, and the Archons are the farmers. I sat there staring at the screen. My hands were shaking. This couldn't be real. This had to be someone's nightmare theory, some fringe speculation that got filed away and forgotten. But the document had signatures, approvals from the highest levels of government, presidents, joint chiefs of staff, CIA directors. This wasn't speculation. This was official policy. Accepted fact among the people who actually knew. I scrolled further. Found a section on harvest events, quantitative analysis. It was a spreadsheet. Columns for date, event description, estimated casualties, measured quantum field distortion, and calculated essence yield. World War I, 17 million dead. Field distortion scale, 8.7. Estimated yield, 340 petajoules. World War II, 85 million dead. Field distortion scale, 9.4. Estimated yield, 1.9 exajoules. The Holocaust alone was listed separately. 6 million dead. Field distortion scale, 9.8. Estimated yield, 890 petajoules. The document noted that the Holocaust's per capita yield was significantly higher than general warfare because the suffering was more concentrated, more prolonged, more psychologically devastating. Industrial genocide was apparently more efficient than conventional warfare from a harvesting perspective. The Rwandan genocide of 1994, 800,000 dead in 100 days. Field distortion scale 9.1. Estimated yield 180 petajoules. September 11, 2001, 2,977 dead. Field distortion scale 8.9. Estimated yield 12 petajoules. The document noted that terrorist attacks had high yield per casualty ratios because of the psychological trauma inflicted on survivors and witnesses. But it wasn't just deaths. The spreadsheet included non-fatal events. The Great Depression. Estimated yield 450 petajoules from sustained economic despair across a decade. Hurricane Katrina. Estimated yield 34 petajoules from displacement, trauma, and loss. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Estimated yield 89 petajoules. Natural disasters, economic collapses, pandemics. All of them generated measurable Archon feeding signatures. And here's what made me want to scream. Some of the events had asterisks next to them. Events marked with a note. Suspected direct influence. The document suggested that some catastrophes weren't just opportunistic feeding. They were orchestrated. The Archons could influence human behavior in subtle ways, amplify existing conflicts, nudge political decisions toward war, increase the likelihood of atrocities by affecting the mental state of key individuals at crucial moments. They couldn't control humans directly. That took too much energy. But they could tip the scales. Make a dictator slightly more paranoid. Make a general slightly more aggressive. Make a population slightly more xenophobic. Small changes that cascaded into massive suffering. I found a memo dated 1962, shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Analysis suggests Entity Number 4 successfully influenced decision-making processes during October Crisis. Soviet Premier's psychological state showed signs of external manipulation, consistent with Archon fear amplification techniques. Recommend immediate investigation into whether Entity Number 4 was attempting to instigate nuclear war as large-scale harvest event. If confirmed, Entity Number 4's containment protocols should be upgraded to prevent future interference. They knew. They knew the Archons were influencing world events even while contained, and they just made notes about it. Upgraded some protocols, but kept the system running, kept feeding them, kept making deals with creatures that were actively trying to kill millions of us for food. The final section of the document was titled Long-Term Projections and Sustainability Concerns. It projected human population growth through 2100. It calculated optimal harvest event frequency. It discussed strategies for maintaining population levels that would maximize total suffering output while preventing societal collapse that might reduce long-term yields. There was a graph showing ideal scenarios. One line represented uncontrolled Archon feeding, frequent catastrophic harvest events that would eventually drive humanity to extinction. Another line represented zero Archon presence, theoretical human development without parasitic influence. And a third line, marked optimal managed scenario, showed controlled feeding through facilities like this one, plus periodic limited-scale conflicts that would maintain Archon satiation while preserving human civilization as a renewable resource. We weren't trying to save humanity. We were managing it. We were the shepherds making sure the flock stayed healthy enough to be sheared regularly, but never quite strong enough to realize they were livestock. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was coming. I logged out, cleared my access history as best I could, and slipped out a back exit just as I heard voices entering the archive room. I made it back to my quarters without being stopped, lay on my bunk, stared at the ceiling, and tried to process what I'd learned. Everything was a lie. Every war we thought we'd fought for freedom or justice or national interest, they were harvest events. Every terrorist attack we thought was about ideology or religion, feeding opportunities. Every genocide we thought was about ethnic hatred or political power, farm management. And we, humanity, we were cattle. We'd been cattle for our entire existence. We'd built civilizations and technologies and art and philosophy and religion, and all of it was happening inside a cage we didn't know existed. The Archons had been farming us for 300,000 years, and the only reason we'd survived this long was because we were a sustainable crop. They kept us alive the way a rancher keeps his herd alive, not out of kindness, out of self-interest, because dead cattle don't produce milk, and extinct humans don't produce suffering. I thought about all the people throughout history who'd sensed this truth. Prophets, mystics, philosophers who talked about the demiurge or the powers and principalities or the Archons, that word again. The same word the ancient Gnostics used to describe the parasitic entities that controlled material reality. They'd known, or suspected, or caught glimpses through meditation or madness, or religious experience. And they'd tried to warn people in the only language they had, myth, metaphor, scripture. But we'd dismissed it all as superstition, as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. We'd thought we were so advanced, so enlightened, so rational. We'd thought we'd moved beyond the need for supernatural explanations. But we were wrong. The supernatural was real. It was just so far beyond our normal perception that we couldn't see it even when it was feeding on us. And now here I was, knowing the truth, knowing that every friend I'd lost in combat, every civilian casualty I'd seen, every tragedy I'd witnessed, all of it had fed something. All of it had made the Archons stronger. All of it had been, in some sense, deliberate, or at least encouraged, cultivated, harvested. And the worst part? I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? And even if they did believe me, what could they do? The Archons had been here for 300,000 years. They'd survived the rise and fall of every human civilization. They'd fed on billions of deaths across millennia. What could one person do against that? What could humanity do, even if we all knew? We were trapped in a system that predated us, that created us, that would outlast us. We weren't at the top of the food chain. We never had been. And now I understood why no one at this facility believed in God anymore. Because if God existed, if there was any kind of benevolent creator watching over humanity, then God had watched us be farmed for 300,000 years and done nothing. Which meant either God didn't care, or God couldn't intervene, or God didn't exist at all. And I didn't know which possibility was worse. They came for me at 0400 hours. I was lying in my bunk, hadn't slept in probably 36 hours, just staring at the ceiling and running through everything I'd read in those archives. The door opened without warning. No knock, no announcement. Just Hendricks and two of those special operations guards in black tactical gear. The ones with the energy weapons and the dead eyes. They didn't point their weapons at me, but the message was clear. I wasn't being invited anywhere. I was being collected. "Get up, Sergeant," Hendricks said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That scared me more than if he'd been angry. "We need to talk." I got up slowly, didn't bother putting on my boots. If this was what I thought it was, if they knew I'd accessed those files, then boots wouldn't matter. Nothing would matter. They walked me through the corridors. Not to an interrogation room, not to the brig, to Hendrix's office on level -1. It was a small space. Desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window that looked out over the sublevel access shafts. He gestured to one of the chairs. I sat. The guards remained outside, closing the door behind them. Hendrix sat down across from me. He didn't look angry, didn't look disappointed. He just looked tired, like he'd been through this conversation before and knew exactly how it would go. "We monitor all access to the archives," he said. "Every login, every file opened, every query entered into the system. Dr. Reeves's credentials were used to access level -2 archives at 22:47 hours 3 nights ago. The access pattern was unusual. Someone with her clearance would already know most of what's in those files. They wouldn't need to jump between sections like a first-time reader trying to get the big picture fast. So we checked the biometric logs, and we found a 60-second gap in the scanner calibration during shift change. Exactly when someone with a cloned access card could slip through undetected. He leaned back in his chair. We pulled security footage from the corridor outside the archives. The image quality isn't great. Those cameras are 40 years old, but it's good enough. We saw you enter. We saw you leave 22 minutes later. And we know exactly which files you accessed because the system logs every page view. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I was caught, dead to rights. No plausible deniability, no excuse. I'd committed what was probably a dozen different crimes under the UCMJ and God knows how many federal statutes. I'd violated my security clearance. I'd accessed classified information I wasn't authorized to see. I'd used someone else's credentials. Any one of those charges would be enough to put me away for years. All of them together? I was looking at life in Leavenworth, or worse. Hendrix watched me for a long moment. "You read Operation Harvest," he said. "It wasn't a question. You know the truth now, about what the Archons are, about what humanity is, about how long this has been going on." He stood up and walked to the window, looked out at the elevator shafts descending into darkness. "I need you to understand something, Sergeant. You're not the first person to go digging for answers. You're not the first soldier who couldn't handle the briefings, who needed to see the raw data, who thought maybe we were lying or exaggerating. We get 1 or 2 like you every year, people who can't accept what they're told, who need to verify it themselves. What happened to them?" I asked. My voice sounded hoarse. Hendrix turned to look at me. "That depends on what they did with the information. Some of them accepted it, processed it, came to terms with the reality and continued their service. Those people are still here. Some of them are in senior positions now. Hell, 2 of the oversight committee members started out exactly like you. Unauthorized archive access, full existential crisis, the whole package. But they adapted. They understood that knowing the truth doesn't change the situation. The Archons still need to be contained. The harvest still needs to continue. And someone has to do the work, whether they like it or not." He paused. "Other people didn't adapt. They couldn't accept it. They tried to run, tried to expose the program, tried to become whistleblowers. Those people," he trailed off, opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a folder. He set it on the desk between us. "Those people made different choices, and those choices had consequences." I opened the folder. Inside were personnel files, photographs, service records, and status reports. I recognized the first name immediately. Staff Sergeant Coleman, the guy I'd tried to talk to during my first week, the one who'd told me not to ask about the sublevels. His file showed he'd been at the facility for 8 months, but there was a note dated 4 months ago. Subject exhibited signs of psychological breakdown following unauthorized access to historical archives. Attempted to contact civilian media. Apprehended during escape attempt. Transferred to level -8 for alternative assignment. Status: active resource. I stared at the words. Active resource. That's what they called it when they strapped someone into a nightmare engine and used them as food. Coleman wasn't guarding the facility anymore. He was feeding it. I flipped to the next file. Corporal Davis. I'd met him once in the chow hall. Quiet guy. Never said much. His status report was similar. Unauthorized archive access. Psychological instability. Attempted sabotage of containment systems. Transferred to level -8. Status: active resource. I went through the whole folder. 12 names. 12 soldiers who'd done exactly what I did. Who'd accessed the archives. Who'd learned the truth. And who'd made the wrong choice about what to do with that knowledge. And at the bottom of the stack, I found 3 more files that made my blood run cold. Sergeant Thompson, Private Chen, Corporal Rodriguez. I knew these names. I'd worked with them. They'd been at Nellis with me. They'd been reassigned to Area 51 a few months before I arrived. I'd asked about them once. Asked another soldier what had happened to them. He'd told me they deserted. Just walked off the base one day and disappeared. The military police were supposedly still looking for them, but that was a lie. They hadn't deserted. They were here, on level -8, strapped into chairs, experiencing personalized nightmares designed to extract maximum suffering, their minds being harvested to feed the Archons. People I knew, people I'd served with, turned into cattle, and no one would ever find them because officially, they didn't exist anymore. Hendricks let me sit with that for a minute, let it sink in. Then he spoke. You have a choice to make, Sergeant Whitfield, and I need you to understand that this is a real choice with real consequences. You can't undo what you know. You can't go back to ignorance. You've seen the truth. You've read the files. You understand what's at stake. So now you have to decide, are you going to be part of the solution, or are you going to become part of the problem? He sat back down, folded his hands on the desk. Option 1. You officially join the program, not as a security guard, not as a temporary assignment, as permanent staff with full access and full knowledge. We promote you to Staff Sergeant. We quadruple your salary. You'll be making $150,000 a year base pay plus hazard bonuses. You get access to the complete archives. You attend the oversight meetings. You help make decisions about containment protocols and harvest efficiency. You become part of the leadership structure. You help us manage this situation and keep humanity safe from uncontrolled Archon predation. Is it pleasant? No. Is it morally simple? Absolutely not. But it's necessary. And someone has to do it. Option 2, he continued, and his voice got quieter, colder. You refuse. You tell me you can't live with this knowledge. You can't be part of this system. You can't participate in the systematic torture of innocent people even if it's supposedly for the greater good. And I respect that position. I really do. It's principled. It's moral. It's exactly what a good person should say. But here's the problem with that option. You still know too much. You've seen the harvest facility. You've read the historical files. You know about the Archons. You know about Operation Harvest. You know that every major government in the world is aware of this and participating in their own versions of the program. That information cannot leave this facility, ever. So if you choose option 2, if you refuse to join the program, then you become a security risk, and security risks get neutralized. But we don't waste resources. We don't just execute people and dump their bodies. That would be inefficient. So instead, we transfer you to level -8. We put you in a chair. We hook you up to a nightmare engine, and we use you. Your suffering feeds the Archons. Your torture serves the greater good whether you agree with it or not. You become the thing you couldn't morally accept being part of. He opened another drawer and pulled out 2 documents, set them side by side on the desk. One was a promotion order. Staff Sergeant Marcus J. Whitfield, assigned to Special Operations Division, Area 51 Containment Facility, salary grade GS-14. The other was a transfer order. Sergeant Marcus J. Whitfield, reassigned to level -8, Research Subject Program, duration indefinite. I need your answer now, Hendricks said. I can't give you time to think about it. I can't let you go back to your quarters to process this, because the longer you wait, the higher the chance you'll do something stupid. Try to run, try to sabotage something, try to warn someone. So I need you to decide right now, in this office, which document I'm going to file. Are you joining us, or are you becoming fuel? He slid a pen across the desk. Sign one of them. Your choice. I looked at both documents. Looked at the promotion order with its salary figures and benefits package. Looked at the transfer order with its clinical language that didn't mention torture or nightmare engines, or the complete destruction of my humanity. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a choice. Not really. It was an illusion of choice. Sign the promotion and become a monster. Sign the transfer and become a victim. Either way, I lost. Either way, I was damned. But one option let me keep my mind. Let me keep my agency. Let me at least have the illusion that I was making decisions, instead of having decisions made to me. I thought about Coleman, about Thompson and Chen and Rodriguez, about all the people strapped into those chairs, experiencing endless, customized torture while their essence was drained away to feed dimensional parasites. I thought about becoming one of them, about spending however many months I lasted in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, about my consciousness being used as fuel, about dying slowly, one forced trauma at a time, until my mind broke completely, and I became one of those empty-eyed husks in long-term containment. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I looked at Hendricks. He met my gaze, steadily. No judgment, no pressure, just waiting. "If I sign the promotion," I said, "if I join officially, I'm complicit. I'm part of the system. I'm responsible for what happens here." Hendricks nodded. "Yes, you are. Just like I am. Just like everyone else at the senior level. We all carry that weight. We all live with that knowledge. Some days it's harder than others. Some nights you can't sleep. Some mornings you wake up and wonder if maybe option 2 would have been better. But then you remember, if we don't do this, if we don't maintain the containment, if we don't feed them in a controlled way, they'll feed in an uncontrolled way, and millions will die instead of dozens. The math is ugly, but it's real. So we carry the weight, because someone has to." I looked at the promotion order one more time. Then I signed it. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but I signed it. Because I wanted to live. Because I was a coward. Because I couldn't accept becoming fuel. Because I was human. And humans will do almost anything to survive, even if survival means becoming something they hate. Hendricks took the document, filed it, shredded the transfer order. "Welcome to the senior staff, Staff Sergeant Whitfield," he said. He stood up and extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, professional, like we just concluded a normal business transaction. "You start your new duties tomorrow. Report to the briefing room at 0800 for your first oversight meeting. You'll be assigned a mentor, probably Dr. Reeves, since you already have some familiarity with her. She'll walk you through the advanced protocols and answer any questions you have. Your pay increase goes into effect immediately. Your new security clearance will be processed by end of day." He walked to the door, opened it. The guards were still waiting outside. "Get some rest, Staff Sergeant. You're going to need it. The first few months in an oversight position are always the hardest. You'll see things that will make the harvest facility look tame. You'll attend meetings where we discuss optimizing suffering output and managing human resources like their crops. You'll help plan future containment protocols and analyze historical atrocities for efficiency metrics. And you'll do all of this while maintaining the fiction that we're the good guys, that we're protecting humanity, that the ends justify the means. Some people can maintain that fiction forever. Other people," he looked at me with those empty eyes, "other people eventually crack. Let's hope you're the first kind." I walked back to my quarters in a daze, lay down on my bunk, stared at the ceiling, and I realized something. I just sold my soul, not metaphorically, not in some abstract moral sense. I'd literally sold my soul. I'd agreed to participate in systematic torture. I'd agreed to help manage a system that treated human beings as renewable resources. I'd agreed to become one of the shepherds tending the flock that I was part of. And the worst part? I felt relieved, because I wasn't going to be strapped into a chair. I wasn't going to become fuel. I'd chosen survival over morality, and I would have to live with that choice for however long I had left. The clock on my wall ticked away, minutes passing, hours, time moving forward whether I wanted it to or not. And I lay there thinking about all the choices that had led me here. Joining the military, accepting the transfer to Area 51, looking into that cell and seeing the Archon, reading the archives, and now this. Signing my name on a document that made me officially, permanently, irreversibly part of the machine. There was no going back now, no escape, no redemption. I was one of them, and God help me, I didn't know if I would ever forgive myself. It's been 3 weeks since I signed that document. 3 weeks since I officially became part of the system I swore I'd never accept. 3 weeks of attending oversight meetings, where we discuss harvest quotas and containment efficiency metrics like we're running a factory instead of a torture facility. 3 weeks of watching those monitors showing 46 people strapped into chairs experiencing endless nightmares. 3 weeks of knowing that I'm complicit in every second of their suffering, and I can't do it anymore. I can't be part of this. I can't carry this knowledge alone, so I'm recording this confession, right now. At 0347 hours on November 9th, 2024, I'm in a supply closet on level -2, speaking into a handheld analog tape recorder I bought from a pawn shop in Rachel 6 weeks ago. Analog because digital leaves traces. Digital can be tracked, intercepted, erased remotely, but this tape is physical, magnetic, low-tech. The security systems here are designed to detect sophisticated threats, digital transmissions, encrypted files, network breaches. They're not designed to catch someone with a $40 tape recorder hiding in a closet at 3 in the morning. I've spent the last 2 weeks planning this, figuring out how to get the information out, how to bypass the security, how to reach someone on the outside who could share this without knowing what they're sharing until it's too late. I have a contact, a civilian, a woman named Sarah who works at a diner in Rachel. She has no idea who I really am or what I really do. She thinks I'm just another Air Force guy stationed at the base. We've talked maybe 5 times. Small talk, weather, local news, nothing deep. But she mentioned once that she runs a podcast, true crime stories, conspiracy theories, UFO sightings, that kind of thing. She has maybe 10,000 subscribers. Not huge, but big enough. I'm going to give her this tape. I'm going to tell her it's a creative writing project, a fictional story I wrote, a narrative podcast script. She'll think it's entertainment. She'll upload it to her channel. And by the time anyone realizes it's real, it'll be too late. It'll be out there, mirrored on a dozen servers, downloaded by thousands of people, impossible to fully suppress. If you're hearing this, that means I succeeded. Or it means they caught me and decided to let it go public anyway, because they've calculated that no one will believe it, that people will dismiss it as fiction, as creative storytelling, as another conspiracy theory in an internet full of conspiracy theories. Maybe they're right. Maybe you're listening to this and thinking it's just a story, just entertainment, just some guy with a good imagination spinning a tale about aliens and government cover-ups. And honestly, part of me hopes you think that, because if you believe this is real, if you accept what I'm telling you is true, then you have to live with the same knowledge I'm living with, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I need to tell you anyway, because someone has to know, someone has to hear the truth, even if they can't accept it. Even if they can't do anything about it. Here's what I've learned in the 3 weeks since I joined the senior staff, what they told me in the oversight meetings, what I've seen in the classified briefings that go beyond even Operation Harvest. The program isn't just American, it's global. Every major government knows about the Archons. Every major government has their own containment facilities. Russia has one in Siberia, China has 2, one in Xinjiang, one in Tibet. The UK has one in Scotland. France has one in the Pyrenees. Israel, India, Australia, Brazil, they all have them. And they all operate the same way. They all capture Archons. They all maintain harvest facilities. They all have quotas of human subjects they need to process to keep the Archons fed and contained. The quotas are agreed upon in secret meetings between intelligence agencies, shadow governments coordinating across borders. They call it the Vienna Protocol, even though it was never signed in Vienna and isn't technically a protocol. It's a gentleman's agreement between nations that are usually enemies. Because on this issue, on the question of Archon containment, there are no enemies. There's just humanity trying to survive parasites that have been farming us since before civilization existed. The quota system works like this. Each country agrees to provide a certain number of subjects per year based on their population. The United States provides approximately 200 subjects annually across multiple facilities. Area 51 is the largest but not the only one. Russia provides around 150. China provides 300 because they have more people and because their government has fewer constraints on disappearing citizens. Smaller countries provide fewer, but everyone contributes. The subjects are carefully selected from populations that won't be missed. Homeless, undocumented immigrants, people with no family, criminals who get black-bagged before trial, political dissidents in authoritarian countries. Occasionally, and this is the part that made me want to vomit when I heard it, occasionally children from extremely dysfunctional situations where their disappearance can be explained away. Foster kids who run away. Street children in developing countries. Kids from war zones where documentation doesn't exist. The selection criteria are cold, clinical, optimized for minimal social disruption and maximum plausible deniability. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The system is sustainable. The math works. Current global population is about 8 billion people. The total number of subjects across all facilities worldwide is approximately 5,000 at any given time. That's 0.00625% of the population. A rounding error, statistically invisible. The annual intake to replace burned-out subjects is around 3,000, still invisible. Compare that to historical harvest events. World War II killed 85 million people. The Spanish flu killed 50 million. The Mongol invasions killed 40 million. Those were uncontrolled Archon feeding frenzies when the entities weren't contained. Now, with the containment system in place, with the controlled harvest facilities feeding them continuously, the large-scale atrocities have decreased, not stopped. There are still conflicts, still genocides, still mass suffering, but the frequency and scale have reduced. The Oversight Committee genuinely believes they've saved millions of lives by sacrificing thousands. They have graphs showing the correlation between containment facility operations and decreased global casualty rates. They have data suggesting that without the program, we'd be experiencing World War III right now. And maybe they're right. Maybe the mathematics of suffering really do work out that way. Or maybe that's just how they justify what they're doing so they can sleep at night. But here's what they're not telling people. Here's what I found in a classified memo that wasn't even supposed to be in the archives I accessed. The Archons are adapting. They're getting stronger. Each generation of entities we capture is more resistant to containment. The dimensional anchors that worked perfectly in 1947 are starting to fail. We've had 3 near-breach events in the last year alone. The entities are learning how to push back against the technology, and the technology isn't improving fast enough because we're not innovating anymore. We're just applying what the Archons already taught us decades ago. We asked them how to build better cages, and they gave us the blueprints. But they only gave us what they wanted us to have. They've been in control this entire time. We think we captured them, but maybe they let us capture them. Maybe the containment system is exactly what they wanted. A reliable food source, concentrated suffering delivered on a schedule. No need to influence world events anymore. No need to orchestrate wars. Just sit in a cell and receive regular meals while humanity slowly forgets they exist. And in 100 years, maybe 200, when the containment technology finally fails completely, when all the anchors break simultaneously, they'll emerge into a world that's completely unprepared because we erased all knowledge of them from public consciousness. We did their work for them. We hid them, protected them, fed them, and told ourselves we were the heroes. So now I'm telling you, I'm breaking every law, every protocol, every oath I ever took. I'm committing treason. I'm violating national security. I'm exposing classified programs that could, according to the Oversight Committee, cause global panic and societal collapse if made public. And maybe they're right. Maybe releasing this information will cause chaos. Maybe people will lose faith in their governments. Maybe the economy will crash. Maybe it'll trigger exactly the kind of mass suffering that feeds the Archons. But I don't care anymore, because the alternative is carrying this secret alone. The alternative is continuing to be part of a system that treats human beings as renewable resources. The alternative is living with the knowledge that I'm complicit in torture and telling myself it's justified because the math works out. I can't do it. I'd rather die knowing I tried to warn people than live knowing I helped maintain the lie. So this is my warning. The Archons are real. They've been farming humanity for 300,000 years. Every government knows. Every major tragedy in history was them feeding. And right now, as you listen to this, there are approximately 5,000 people in facilities around the world experiencing customized nightmares so intense that their suffering can be extracted and used as food for dimensional parasites. And there's no escape, no rescue, no accountability. The system is global. The system is permanent. And the system doesn't care about justice or morality or individual human rights. It only cares about maintaining the harvest. Here's what's going to happen after I release this tape. If you're hearing this, then I either succeeded in getting it out, or I was caught trying, and they decided to let it spread, because they're confident no one will believe it. If you believe it, if you accept that this is real and not fiction, then you need to understand something. Sharing this information won't save you. It won't save anyone. The system is too big, too entrenched, too protected. You can't fight it. You can't expose it in any meaningful way because the people who would need to investigate are the same people who are running it. Presidents, prime ministers, intelligence directors, they all know. They all approved it. There's no authority higher than them to appeal to. The only thing sharing this information will do is mark you as a potential security risk. And security risks get monitored, tracked, assessed for threat level. If you're vocal enough, if you gather too much attention, if you start to convince people that this is real, they'll come for you. Not immediately, not obviously, but you'll disappear. A car accident, a home invasion, a sudden heart attack. And 6 months later, you'll be in a chair somewhere in a facility you never knew existed, experiencing nightmares designed to extract maximum suffering. So be careful. Share this if you want. Spread it if you think people need to know. But understand the risk. The more viral this goes, the faster they'll act to contain it. And containment might mean disappearing everyone who takes it seriously. As for me, I don't have much time left. I'm recording this at 0412 hours. My shift starts at 0600. I have about 90 minutes to finish this tape, get it out of the facility, and get it to Sarah before anyone notices I'm not in my quarters. I don't think I'm going to make it. I've had the feeling for the last 2 days that I'm being watched more closely than usual. Hendricks has been checking on me more often, asking how I'm adapting, asking if I'm sleeping okay, asking if I have any concerns about the program. I think they know. I think they've been monitoring me since I signed that promotion order, waiting to see if I'd crack, waiting to see if I'd try to expose them, and I did exactly what they expected. So this might be the last thing I ever record. This might be my final statement before they black bag me and transfer me to level -8. And honestly, part of me is okay with that, because at least then I won't have to pretend anymore. At least then, I won't have to sit in oversight meetings and discuss optimization strategies for human suffering. I'll just be a victim. And maybe that's what I deserve. Maybe that's the punishment that fits the crime of knowing and doing nothing for 3 weeks. But before that happens, I need you to do something for me. I need you to comment, right now. Wherever you're listening to this, your bedroom, your car, your office, walking down the street with headphones, comment where you are. Tell me you heard this. Tell me you're real. Because if this recording disappears tomorrow, if it gets scrubbed from every server and erased from every device, at least I'll know that for one moment, someone somewhere heard the truth. Someone somewhere knows what's really happening beneath Area 51 and facilities like it around the world. Someone somewhere will remember that there was a soldier named Marcus Whitfield who tried to warn humanity that we're not the dominant species, that we've never been free, that we're livestock in a farm that spans the entire planet and has been operating since before we learned to write. Comment where you're listening, because tomorrow, you might not be there anymore. They might come for you. They might decide you're too much of a risk, and I certainly won't be here, because I hear footsteps in the corridor outside. I hear voices. I hear someone saying my name. They found me. They know what I'm doing, and they're coming. So this is it. This is my last message. Remember what I told you. Remember that the Archons are real. Remember that suffering is harvested. Remember that your government knows and has always known and will never tell you.